Chapter 1267. Young Master, this is the will of the people. Seeing so many people spontaneously showing happy smiles on their faces, Beta Persei did not forget to flatter him. This is because we brought them more than King Hardenbarter brought them. Of course the people will make a choice. It's just that they were born here. They can welcome me today, but in the future they may choose to welcome others when they are given more benefits. So the migration work cannot be stopped. When the people of the provinces arrive, they will all be replaced. Yang Chendong will not easily believe others, let alone change his previous decision because of a smiling face. Since the facts have proven that the migration work is the best way to solve the internal problems, of course he will not hesitate to carry it out and will not change it at will. Yes, young master. Beta Persei quickly agreed. One of his main tasks working next to Yang Chendong was to act as an assistant. He would remember everything that was said and ordered and would instruct the specialized people to carry it out later. After agreeing, Beta Persei summarized the information he had just received. Young Master, just now the commander of the new 5th Army, Sherwanshan, made a request. There are 100,000 Walla cavalry in the northwest and 20,000 Walla cavalry in the northeast. He wants to try to chase them all the way. Young Master, please give the order. A total of 40,000 cavalrymen were sent to stop the 4th Army Division. Among them, 20,000 were Walla and 20,000 were Kazakh. When the general counterattack was launched last night, Yeshen did not escape to the southwest like the other coalition forces, but chose to go to the northwest to join Beaumuir's 100,000 iron cavalry. Now the problem is that Yang Chendong only has a seemingly mobile new 5th Army in his hands. Their ability can only destroy one part of the enemy, so the choice must be decided by Yang Chendong. Is there a need to choose? Yang Chendong stopped and looked back at Beta Persei. Beta Persei, who didn't know what Yang Chendong meant, was a little confused, but since the young master asked, he still said tentatively, "We should choose to pursue Yeshen. This is our old opponent. It's best to take this opportunity to get rid of him." A soft sigh came from Yang Chendong's mouth. Thinking that his answer did not satisfy the young master, Beta Persei scratched the back of his head and said, "Then let's pursue the 40,000 cavalrymen. They are few in number and easy to deal with." "Well, it looks like you can't think of a good idea. Let's do it this way. The new 5th Army will be responsible for pursuing the 40,000 cavalrymen of the coalition forces. Matson will lead 30,000 cavalrymen to pursue the escaping Yeshen. This time we can't let any of them go," Yang Chendong said with an extremely firm voice. In his eyes, there was no such thing as choosing one of the two. He wanted to choose both. When he heard that even the 30,000 cavalrymen under Matson would be sent out, Beta Persei became nervous. "Young master, this way we won't have any troops around us." Once what? Do you think the coalition forces would dare to come to Turpan at this time? Besides, it's not like we don't have any troops. Don't we still have 2,000 black cavalry and 2 regiments of cold front warriors? They are the most elite. Are you afraid that they won't be able to protect the young master? Yang Chendong knew what Beta Persei wanted to say, so he just said it directly. Yang Chendong was so decisive that Beta Persei knew that there was no room for negotiation. He immediately said, "Yes, I will give them the order according to the young master's instructions." At this time, the 5 nations coalition forces had just been defeated. They really didn't have the courage to cause trouble for Turpan at this time. In addition, whether it was the black cavalry or the cold front warriors, they could each fight against 10 enemies. So the security around him wasn't bad. Beta Persei thought about it and found that there was no problem, so he went to pass the order. Soon, the 2 armies received the order and went to their respective targets. Northeast of Turpan. From afar, it was still covered in snow and a vast expanse of white. The cold wind blew, blowing on people's faces as if they were being cut by a knife. A large formation of cavalry was currently moving with great difficulty on this road. They were Gu Lijiang's troops who had lost their target. At this moment, Gu Lijiang's face was extremely ugly. He didn't expect that the wind and snow this time would be so heavy that he even lost his target. Now all he could see was a vast expanse of white. Where do you want him to go to find the missing 5-star army? Should he just go back like this? Gu Lijiang didn't dare. He clearly understood Keliai's temperament. He was the younger brother of Aksanjanabek Khan. In the entire country and the military, he wouldn't give face to anyone except his elder brother. Many times, in order to establish his authority, he would find trouble and kill people. Not to mention that he had just committed a grave mistake. He couldn't just admit defeat like this. He had to continue looking, maybe there was still a chance. Gu Lijiang said, then ordered to continue expanding the search area. At this moment, for his own life, his own mission, he completely ignored the soldiers in the army who had been working for 2 days without rest. The snow finally stopped, but it still continued. Under the sky, visibility was very low. It was precisely because of this that Ning Wenfeng's infantry division approached the area without being discovered. It wasn't until the other side was less than 3 miles away that both sides discovered each other at the same time. There's the 5-star army here. There's an enemy here. Almost at the same time, 2 loud shouts rang out, attracting everyone's attention and causing both sides to become excited. Ning Wenfeng was the commander of the infantry division. Although the number of soldiers under his command was the largest in the entire new 5-star army, he didn't have the help of war horses, so he couldn't move fast enough. This was his biggest disadvantage. Fortunately, the wind and snow had been blowing recently, so the war horses couldn't increase their speed. This gave the infantry an opportunity. This time, Ning Wenfeng wanted to be the first to find the enemy and obtain the first merit. For this reason, Ning Wenfeng issued a strict order to all the regimental commanders. That was, unless one of their brothers found the enemy, they absolutely couldn't retreat at will, let alone return empty-handed. Under his urging, the infantry advanced decisively and quickly, faintly leaving the other 3 cavalry divisions behind. This was the result of the snow. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It seemed that the heavens hadn't finished favoring Ning Wenfeng. Not only did it allow them to be the fastest, it also allowed them to be the first to find the target. It was as if this shout attracted the attention of all 15,000 officers of the infantry division. At the same time, Gu Lijiang was also excited. He originally thought that the target had disappeared, but he didn't expect to see it in the end. We finally found it, haha. Gu Lijiang looked up to the sky and laughed, thanking the heavens. But if he knew that what he found wasn't the 2 regiments of the 4th Infantry Division, but a 15,000-strong infantry division of the 5-star army, he wouldn't be able to smile now. Instead, he would be thinking of how to escape from this place. There weren't so many ifs in the world. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many things happening. Then, when both sides charged forward with excitement, a great battle between cavalry and infantry began. Under the snow that was half a meter high, the advantage of cavalry couldn't be fully displayed. In the end, the Kazakh cavalry gave up on their war horses and changed to fighting on foot. Adding on the fact that they hadn't rested for 2 days, their physical strength had dropped to the extreme. Just from this point of view, Gu Lijiang had already lost the initiative. Along the way, Bu Sishi's physical strength had also decreased, but compared to the Kazakh army it was a lot better. In addition, Ning Wenfeng had promised before the battle that if they found the enemy and won the battle, he would reward them handsomely. This caused their morale to be very high. This also gave them a lot of points in the following battle. Comparing the two, from the start of the battle, the Kazakh army was at a disadvantage. After fighting in the snow for more than 8 hours, Gu Lijiang's troops were starting to show signs of not being able to defeat the enemy. It was also at this time that the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division of the new 5-star army arrived. Under the leadership of Division Commander Ancient River, they appeared on the battlefield like fierce tigers. This was the last straw that broke the camel's back. The Kazakh cavalry's morale finally began to show signs of collapse. In ancient times, when 2 sides fought, it was a battle of morale. Regardless of which side had this point, it was very likely that they would win. Even if they had fewer troops, there were many examples of people who won with fewer troops. No matter which side, once the morale of the troops collapsed, no matter how many soldiers there were, they would only be a motley crew. In the end, they would only be defeated. The appearance of the 1st Cavalry Division had broken the morale of Gu Lijiang's troops. The soldiers under her had either fled or surrendered. There weren't many people who were still fighting the enemy. In the next 2 hours, the Kazakh army had been destroyed. Gu Lijiang had died in battle, and the enemy had captured about 12,000 soldiers. Come, leave 2 regiments behind to look after these prisoners. We will continue to look for the 20,000 Walla cavalry. Ning Wenfeng didn't stop just because he had obtained a victory. In his view, this was just the beginning. When Ancient River saw Ning Wenfeng's order, his eyes widened. Then he laughed heartily. Good, Division Commander Ning. I didn't expect you to have such a valiant side. You weren't like this in the past. Ancient River was right. Although Ning Wenfeng was in charge of a portion of the military in the past, he rarely did things so decisively. Even when there was a war, he rarely went to the battlefield. He was the kind of person who could be considered a military advisor. But now he was displaying the style of a valiant general. Ancient River couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Haha. Ning Wenfeng replied with a smile. Of course, the current situation was different from the past. When he was in the Ming army, he was just idling around. He took the responsibility of preserving his strength. As long as he didn't make any big mistakes and was willing to send money to the higher-ups, he could keep his position. But in the 5-star army, all the military officers were judged based on their achievements. Here there was no need to talk about seniority or background. Everything depended on who was stronger. Chapter 1268. In the face of the situation where the capable were the top and the mediocre were the bottom, as long as one was a smart person, they should know what to do. Ning Wenfeng was originally a smart person among smart people. Naturally, he understood this point long ago and naturally knew what to do. This time, Ning Wenfeng was so desperate because he wanted to rely on military achievements to prove himself. At the same time, he wanted to prove that Yang Qindong's vision was not wrong. Their new 5 armies was an army that could fight. Just like when they were rushing to Tulyafan, even though the soldiers were very tired, none of them complained. They just wanted to prove themselves and complete the mission better. Ning Wenfeng's ambition was not small, but his luck seemed to have run out. After searching for several days, he even found the cold front company that Commander De Chong had left behind to watch the bicycle's safety. However, he did not see the figure of the Walla cavalry. In fact, he did not know that General Chao Lu had already left here with 20,000 cavalry and rushed to the place where Bomur was. Along with him was the leader of the Walla cavalry, Yes Hen, who was rushing from another direction. After the failure of the 5 armies to besiege Turpan city, Yes Hen lost confidence in this so-called allied army. This was not a united army at all. There were too many subordinates and everyone wanted to take advantage of the situation. How could they win a battle when there were so many different voices in an army? How could they win a battle? How could they win a battle? Yes Hen, who could not see any hope, finally gave up all his fantasies. He decided to work alone like before. With so many elite cavalry in his hands, even if they were not a match for the 5-star army, how could he be afraid of others? At worst, he would just stay away from the 5-star army in the future. How could the world be surnamed Yang? With this goal in mind, Yes Hen sent someone to find Chao Lu a few days ago when Beta Persei suddenly bombarded his artillery positions. He told him not to search for the 5-star army anymore and to go straight to where Bomur was. They had to leave this place and stay away from all the forces and territories of the 5-star army. Reality proved that Yezi's thoughts were correct. When he saw the 5-star army's counterattack begin, he did not put up any resistance, nor did he have any desire to fight back. Instead, he quickly led his 15,000 cavalry out of Turpan, heading straight for where Bomur was. Originally, he had 20,000 cavalrymen with him. However, when the siege was not going well, he listened to Hikagen's words and took out 5,000 cavalrymen. He told them to give up their expertise in horsemanship and become infantrymen to siege the city. In the end, other than the 600 injured, the rest died in the siege. This made him hate Hikagen and the others even more. You deserve to lose. What kind of idiot general would give such an order to let the infantry attack the city? Yes Hen thought angrily. He did not think about it at all. When Keegan made this suggestion, he had raised both hands in agreement. Whether it was Yes Hen or Chao Lu, they were now leading their cavalry to Bomur's location as fast as possible. But they did not know that Bomur's situation was not good at this moment. At least, he was far from being in control of the situation as they thought. In terms of military strength, Bomur, who had nearly 100,000 cavalry, was undoubtedly the most powerful. But they were facing the nearly 50,000 5-star army, and all of them were elites. No one would underestimate such an opponent, nor would they dare to. The two sides faced each other like this, separated by 8 li in the wind and snow. No one moved rashly. It looked like they were evenly matched, but only Bomur knew that as the days passed, his situation would only get worse. There was only one reason, and that was that he was facing the 5-star army. This was a powerful enemy that could send reinforcements at any time. On the other hand, he already had the most cavalry. Even if leader Yes Hen and General Chao Lu came here, there was a limit to how much they could increase their strength. Compared to the 5-star army who would send countless reinforcements, and compared to Yang Qindong who was so rich that no one could see his trump cards, the longer the stalemate, the more unfavorable it would be for them. Even though he clearly knew this, Bomur could not retreat. First, he had already received news from leader Yes Hen, telling him to wait here. He could not guarantee where he would meet up with the leader if he left now. Second, in the current situation, the two sides could still maintain the balance if they did not move. But if one side left, would the other side chase after them? If it was a direct confrontation with 100,000 cavalry, Bomur didn't fear the 5-star army that had less than 50,000 cavalry. However, if he took the initiative to leave, and the enemy began to pursue him, even he didn't dare to guarantee what would happen during the pursuit. In other words, Beaumur was currently being watched and could not move. He could not guarantee that he would be able to escape unscathed. Now, all he could do was wait for leader Yesen to appear, and let him decide on the big plan. Compared to Beaumur's side, the 5-star army side was also not in a good situation. Everything was because the first army did not appear on time, causing the pincer attack to be delayed again and again. In the camp, Commander Bai Shuang, who was dressed in a mighty military uniform and had the rank of senior colonel, said, "I have already reported the matter of the first army not appearing on time to teacher." His voice was firm, his expression calm. Bai Shuang's words caused the expressions of the other commanders in the tent to change. Everyone knew that the first army didn't arrive on time. For this matter, the new 5-star army commander Su Ku had personally called Commander Su He of the new 5-star army, saying that because the snow was too thick and the roads were difficult to travel on, their advance speed was greatly hindered, and they were unable to reach the designated location on time. He admitted his mistake and asked for 5 more days. He would definitely arrive on time and ask for forgiveness at that time. After receiving the contents of this telegram, Commander Su He immediately took it out and showed it to all the commanders around him. Although he did not say anything, sometimes not saying anything represented his attitude. It meant that Su He wanted to give face to Su Kuda. The army would wait for 5 more days before launching the attack. For a dignified army commander to admit his mistake, and with such a humble attitude, the other military commanders had no choice but to suppress their anger. After all, they were all in the same pot, and it was impossible for them not to make mistakes. Giving others a chance was the same as giving themselves a chance. However, they had never imagined that Bai Shuang would suddenly say this when Su He called them together to discuss the military operation plan of how to launch the attack when the first alien army arrived 4 days later. Everyone was in an uproar at once. Compared to everyone else, Bai Shuang's identity was naturally very special. He was Yang Qindong's student. When others were just qualified to address Yang Qindong as the 6th young master, he was already close enough to address him as teacher. In ancient times, heaven, earth, ruler, teacher, and teacher were existences that were highly respected. Among them was his teacher. Teachers were also extremely particular about inheritance, and it also represented a closer relationship. Based on this, although he was only a commander, no one dared to look down on Bai Shuang's words. Even the only general present, Su He, was the same. This was because he was certain that as long as Bai Shuang did not make any major mistakes, with this person's age, his future achievements would definitely surpass his own. Therefore, when Bai Shuang said that he had already reported this matter to Yang Qindong through his own radio, Su He did not have the slightest intention of reprimanding him. He only silently mourned for Su Kuda in his heart. "Commander Su, this time it's not that I don't want to help you, but this matter has already been reported to the 6th young master. You're in trouble." A military meeting to discuss important matters was also stopped because of Bai Shuang's words. After all, even Bugnam of Gojoseon knew about this matter. This meant that the plan could change at any time. It was a little too early for them to discuss what would happen in a few days. Yes, Su Kuda was in trouble, and the situation had indeed changed as everyone expected. When Yang Qindong received Bai Shuang's telegram in Tulyafan City, his eyes flashed with anger. If it was only because of the weather that they were unable to arrive at the designated location on time, Yang Qindong would not be so angry. But now, the first army of the foreign races didn't inform him about this matter. Instead, they wanted to hide it from him and inform the other armies. This was something Yang Qindong couldn't tolerate. This was deceit. It was a blatant lie. If they succeed this time, there may be similar things happening in the future. If this is not stopped, will there be a day when the military commanders below join forces to deceive him or even deal with him? Since ancient times, internal strife and even internal strife were allowed in the army, but they would never allow the loss of military power to happen. Because this is a provocation to a leader, it is a deadly threat. Inform the whole army. With anger flashing in his eyes, Yang Qindong exuded an indescribable murderous aura from top to bottom. Yang Er, who was beside Yang Qindong, felt his entire body tremble. The rage that was being emitted from Yang Qindong's body made him feel as if he was about to lose his balance. He only felt better if his entire body kept trembling. This is the aura of a superior. Army notification: New Army Commander Su He will be given a demerit. New Army Light Cavalry Regiment Commander Ma Xiangshan, Far Eastern Army 1st Cavalry Division Commander Dai Kuo will be given a serious warning. For divisional officers of the new army will be given a warning. First Army Commander Su Kuda. Yang Qindong suddenly stopped here, which made Beta Persei, who was in charge of recording, break out in a cold sweat. He knew how big of a shock this military notification would cause. I'm afraid that many people's future prospects will be greatly affected. But who knows how the main character, Suda, would deal with this. Chapter 1269. After hesitating for a moment, Yang Qindong's expression became firm again. Su Kuda will be demoted to regiment commander, replacing Bai Shuang's position as regiment commander. Bai Shuang will assume the position of regiment commander. Everything will be carried out after this battle. After all, Bai Shuang was too young and didn't have any experience as a division commander. Being in charge of a regiment was very different from being in charge of an army. However, considering that Bai Shuang was the regiment commander of the 1st Cavalry Division and was already a senior colonel, it wasn't too sudden for him to take on the role of a general. As long as he made some contributions, he would be promoted. Beta Persei saw that Yang Qindong didn't have any other orders, so he went to report to Wang Shan. He could imagine what kind of influence and shock this telegram would have once it was sent to the entire army. Just as Beta Persei thought, this telegram was sent to the entire army. Any army, division, or regiment that was high enough to be equipped with a radio would soon know about it. A lot of people didn't know what happened that made Yang Qindong so angry. But as the person who knew about it, the commander of the First Army, Su Kuda, was completely dumbfounded. Looking at this telegram that was extremely heavy for him, he froze in place and didn't say a word for a full 15 minutes. Commander. The commander of the 301 Division, too high, didn't know what happened. He only saw that Su Kuda didn't move at all, so he carefully came up and asked, "Did Bugnam of Gojoseon have any new orders?" "Oh, you take a look. Also, don't call me commander anymore. After the army meets up with the new army, I will report to the new unit." Su Kuda smiled bitterly. After he said this, he sent the telegram to his trusted subordinate, Tu Hai. At this moment, Tu Hai was also very shocked. What did he mean by not calling him commander anymore? Did he get promoted again? That shouldn't be the case. Right now, Tu Hai was still a senior colonel. It was already very difficult for him to be a commander with this position. How could there be a better position than this? With all kinds of doubts, Tu Hai opened the telegram. When he saw the contents clearly, his expression changed drastically. After a long while, he pointed at the telegram. This. He was speechless. Suka didn't care about Tu Hai's reaction. At this time, he had already awakened from his shock. This time he had indeed done something very wrong. He actually wanted to hide the truth from the 6th young master. This kind of action of treating military orders as child's play could be interpreted as deception. This should not be tolerated by any superior. It was already a blessing that he wasn't thrown into jail. Now he was even given the position of regiment commander. This was giving him a chance to take the blame and perform meritorious deeds. If he gave up on himself at this time, then even the gods would not be able to save him. Right now, the most important thing to do was to make up for his mistakes and stand up again. He didn't want to disappoint the 6th young master. Commander 2, didn't Commander Mingji say that he has a way to speed up the army's advance? Now invite him over. Before, he wanted to protect his dignity as a commander, so he suppressed the 3rd Division Commander Sensei Naganabu. Now that Suku had been taught a lesson, there was no need for him to protect his dignity. Suku suddenly woke up. After that, someone reported his performance to Yang Qindong. It was also because of this action that his life was saved. Because if he really chose to give up on himself, even the position of commander of the world's #1 army might not be his. After experiencing this incident, Su Kuda had finally grown up and would have greater achievements in the future. Of course, this was all in the future. In the tent, Bai Shuang looked at the telegram and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The reason why he reported this matter to Yang Qindong was because he didn't want to do anything that would let his teacher down. He didn't expect that the position of commander would fall on his head. Although a soldier who didn't want to be a general wasn't a good soldier, this kind of position was not what he wanted. With his own efforts, Bai Shuang believed that one day he would be able to become a general, and that day wasn't too far away. Now, although time was saved, it was inevitable that he would be criticized. Since it was Yang Qindong's order and it was reported to the entire army, it couldn't be changed. Since there's a heavy burden on my shoulders, I'll work hard. Bai Shuang, who knew that he couldn't change the situation, could only accept it. But now, no matter how you looked at it, his expression was like he was pretending to be obedient. Bai Shuang was pleasantly surprised. In contrast, the new army's commander Su He had a worried expression. Especially when he looked at the 1st Cavalry Division's commander, Kulu, he felt even more guilty. Kulu's outstanding performance, especially when he used the strength of a single division to block the attack of 30,000 elite cavalrymen of Wala, heavily injuring the enemy in a situation where he suffered very few casualties. It was these achievements that made it a sure thing that he would be promoted to a commander. Suhi had already reported this to Yang Qindong and basically received his approval. He received news that the new army had already decided on the position of commander, and it was very likely that he would be the commander of the 102nd Division, second only to the 101st Division's commander, Lu Zhua. It seemed that after this battle, he would be promoted by 2 ranks from a division to an army. But now, a warning had completely ruined this good opportunity. According to the rules of the 5-star army, once an officer received a warning, there was no possibility of promotion within half a year. Half a year, by that time the new army would have been formed, which meant that Kulu lost this opportunity to improve. Facing the silent Kulu, Suhi opened and closed his mouth, then closed and opened again. In the end he said bitterly, "Kulu, I'm sorry." This time Kulu's mood was a bit heavy. Seeing such a fat piece of meat fly away just like that, no one would feel good about it. But it was already the truth, there was no point in blaming anyone, he could only say that he was unlucky. Thinking about how he would have to work under Suhi in the future, Kulu could only force a smile and said, "General, I'd still like to fight under your command." No one would take these words seriously, they were obviously comforting words. Suhi waved his hand and said seriously, "This time I owe you. Don't worry, if there's an opportunity next time, I'll do my best to fight for you." "Then thank you, General, for your help." Kulu pretended to have his eyes lit up and said. But both of them knew that the position of a general wasn't easy to come by, and how could it be easy to fight for? This time, because there were 3 general positions at once, and because Kulu made a great contribution, he had the qualifications to have such a good opportunity. Next time, even if there really was a general position, there was no guarantee that it would be in the bag. Suku received the harshest criticism and demotion. But he didn't let it go. Instead, he quickly adjusted his position. Based on the principle of being in position for a minute, doing a good job for 60 seconds, he found the 303 RD Division's commander, Sensei Naganabu. After some discussion, he quickly approved of the idea of clearing snow at the front and speeding up the march. The order was quickly passed down to the entire army. Sure enough, they arrived at the designated location 3 days later. They came to the northwest of Bomu-er's army of 100,000, and formed a pincer attack with Suhi's new army. Bomu-er was a cautious person, otherwise he wouldn't have been chosen by Yeshen to stay behind at the headquarters. In order to prevent being surrounded by the 5-star army, he sent out all of his scouts, and the furthest he sent them was 50 miles away. When the first army of the foreign races arrived, he received the news, and his expression became even more unsightly. Before, he could still use the advantage of numbers to suppress the enemy's 5-star army, but with the appearance of the 30,000 5-star army, his advantage in numbers was very small. He didn't need to fight on both sides. No matter how he looked at it, he was now in a passive position. Fortunately, he received another message that night. Tomorrow evening, the 15,000 cavalrymen led by the previous leader and the 20,000 cavalrymen led by General Chao Lu would meet up with him here. With this, they had an additional 30,000 troops, which allowed them to regain their advantage in terms of military strength. Regrettably, this good mood didn't last long. Very quickly, the scouts came back with news that the leader had personally sent over. Behind them, there were still 35,000 cavalrymen rushing over. Both sides were only a day's distance away from each other. There are still 30,000 5-star army cavalry? Where did the other 4 countries go? Bomu-er was naturally shocked when he heard the news. Logically speaking, the 5-star army shouldn't have so many troops in their hands, unless they were all used to deal with him. It must be like this. The 4 countries were beaten up, and with the heavy snow affecting the speed of the army, they should be holed up at home right now. In this case, didn't it mean that the 5-star army's main goal was to deal with him? When the 5 countries were together, they couldn't gain the slightest advantage, and they even lost one battle after another. Now that he had to face the 5-star army alone, Bomu-er didn't have the slightest chance of victory. Being afraid before the battle, this wasn't something a qualified general should do. Forcefully calming his mind, Bomu-er's gaze fell on the last message sent by Yeshen. When his gaze fell on the words "only a day away," his eyes flashed with thought. I can only stake it all. Come, call the scouts over. After thinking for a while, Bomu-er decided to take the risk and attack. He had to kill his way out before the 30,000 cavalry of the 5-star army arrived. Otherwise, if he was really surrounded, he wouldn't have the slightest chance of victory. Chapter 1270. After the scout reported that Bo Mu'er had given the news to Yes Hen, Bo Mu'er held a military meeting that very night, and selected a group of 5,000 death cavalry. The so-called death cavalry referred to those who did not fear death. Because of various reasons they made some mistakes and should be killed. Because of this, they came to the battlefield with the determination to die. And those who were not even afraid of death were the most terrifying. Not only that, Bo Mu'er also gave the defeated Qin 50,000 troops, ordering him to stop the 5-star army from the west from sending reinforcements to the 5-star army from the northeast no matter what. If you can stop them, it will be a great merit. If you can't, you can use your death as an apology. Chang Tian is watching you, I wish you good luck. Under Bo Mu'er's serious expression, all kinds of orders were given, and the 90,000 cavalry quickly moved. At noon on the second day, they suddenly launched an attack on the first army of the non-humankind from the northeast. This sudden attack without any warning had indeed caught the first army off guard. Fortunately, Yang Qindong's report had just been sent out, and all the officers were very careful. Even if no one expected the Walla cavalry to attack, after a moment of panic, they still managed to stop the other party's attack. They did not immediately send out the 5,000 death cavalry, but only sent out 5,000 ordinary cavalry, in order to test the strength of the 5-star army. Seeing the 5,000 cavalry quickly being pushed back, unable to move an inch, Bo Mu'er could not help but sigh. The 5-star army is really strict and not easy to deal with. After sending out his sigh, Bo Mu'er had no intention of retreating. His goal was very simple, and that was to continuously attack, causing the first army to feel fatigued. Then, when leader Yes Hen and General Chao Lu arrived, he would gather a large number of troops and open a bloody path. At that time, his troops would be nearly 3 times the enemy's, and charging out should not be a problem. Now, it was time to see if Qin could defend against the attack of the 5-star army from the west. Thinking about it, it shouldn't be a problem since it was 50,000 against 50,000 and they were on the defensive side. Although the snow had stopped, the thick layer of snow still became the biggest stumbling block for the cavalry. As the attacking party, they were at a great disadvantage. It was just like how Bo Mu'er's attack on the first army was not very smooth. When the new army wanted to support them, they also faced great difficulties. At the beginning of the war, Commander Su He, Commander Bai Shuang, Commander Ma Xiangshan, Commander Dai Qua and the others were all confused about the reason why they started a fight without any warning. They couldn't understand why the Walla cavalry would suddenly go crazy and choose to attack at this time. Fortunately, everyone was prepared to fight a big and fierce battle when they came here. Although they weren't fully mentally prepared, the soldiers were all experienced soldiers. They quickly adapted and began to charge towards the Walla cavalry camp in an orderly manner. They wanted to attack from 2 sides with the first army. Even if they couldn't do it, they could at least share some of the firepower and pressure of their brother's army. However, under the heavy snow, the attack wasn't very effective, especially when facing General Qin, who was doing his best to stop them. This person had the idea of dying if he didn't succeed. He also had 50,000 cavalry in his hands. In terms of troops and chariots, he was even more powerful than Su He and the others. In a situation where they didn't have any advantage, after Commander Chang Bo of the new army's 4th Cavalry Division attacked, 2 regiments of cavalry were crippled. Are they crazy? It was rare to encounter such a tough battle. Commander Chang Bo was shocked and quickly reported the situation to the commander. At the same time, he couldn't help but reduce the frequency of the attack. If they continued to lose like this, not only would they not be able to break through, it was very likely that his entire 4th Cavalry Division would be lost here. This was something that no military commander wanted to see and wouldn't do. In the new army's tent, after Commander Chang Bo's report was sent here, everyone including Su He frowned. It was clear that they didn't understand the actions of the Walla cavalry. It looked like they were trying to break through, but it wasn't that easy to do. Although the first army of the foreign races was a newly formed army, there were many veterans among them. Furthermore, the roads were passable and the snow was too thick, so it would not be easy for them to charge out. It was very likely that they would suffer heavy casualties and fail to achieve their goal. They could see this logic, and so could the Walla's general. But why did they still do this? The tent was abnormally quiet for a while. After a full 15 minutes, everyone still couldn't find the slightest clue. No one said a word. In the end, it was Bai Shuang who spoke. Okay, I see that everyone can't think of a reason like me. Let's report it to the teacher. Report it? Su He raised his eyebrows after hearing this. It wasn't that he didn't think of doing this, but wouldn't that prove his incompetence? He had just been executed. But when he thought of this kind of battle, if a mistake in judgment led to even greater losses, the result was not something he could bear. Besides, who was Bai Shuang? Even if he didn't agree, he had a separate radio in his hands that could contact Yang Qindong. If that happened, he would only be more passive. Okay, then let's report it. Let's ask the sixth young master to give us a clear path. After thinking about it, Su He decided to accept Bai Shuang's suggestion. The telegram was quickly drafted. After the commanders read it and found no problems, they reported it through the radio. After a stick of incense's time, a reply came. Compared to Su He and Bai Shuang, who only focused on one army in one area, Yang Qindong looked at the entire situation. Although he didn't know about the 20,000 cavalry led by Cao Lu, he knew that Yes Hen led 15,000 elite cavalry to meet up with General Bo Mure. With Yang Qindong's intelligence, he naturally realized that Bo Mure was preparing to break out of the encirclement. At the same time, it was to prevent the 30,000 cavalry led by Na Ri Song from pressuring them enough to find a way out. After all, once Na Ri Song's 30,000 cavalry arrived, they wouldn't have any advantage in terms of numbers. This was an opportunity to make the Walla army stay, but it wasn't a good opportunity. Even a cornered beast would fight, let alone 100,000 Walla elite cavalry. Once they went crazy, coupled with the snow, the various troops might not be able to reach the designated location on time to provide reinforcements. In this way, there would be too many uncertainties in the war. After thinking about it, Yang Qindong didn't give the order to fight to the death. Instead, he pointed out the Walla army's movements and allowed the various troops to deal with it as they saw fit without losing too much of their combat strength. Dealing with it as they saw fit was equivalent to handing over the command to the various commanders. This was also Yang Qindong's way of commanding. As the military strength of his subordinates continued to expand, Yang Qindong could no longer do everything by himself like before. Therefore, it was necessary to delegate power appropriately, especially to those commanders who rushed to the front lines. They were better able to direct the movements of the battle. Sometimes, opportunities were fleeting, and if they weren't grasped in time, there might be problems. Yang Qindong had been practicing for many years and understood how to use people. It was precisely because of Yu Qian that he didn't have to worry about Qiqian City and didn't need to be distracted. Similarly, it was because of the existence of Tiger's Mane that he was like a nail nailed into Xiwan City. As a result, his influence and power were growing. To put it simply, the way to use people was to learn to use people and learn to trust people, and not to give orders in every aspect. It was like Zhuge Liang who did everything by himself. In the end, he was exhausted to death, and without his subordinates, he immediately lost his drive and ability to command. Old Jiang was the same, constantly giving orders from the back, causing the battle plan to change again and again. Loopholes appeared frequently, and the army was defeated in the end. With these precedents as an example, how could Yang Qindong follow in his footsteps? When the telegram was sent to them, the eyes of the commanders in the tent lit up after they read it. This discretion was very significant. Handing over the command to them was a form of trust. But how could it not be a heavy responsibility? Everyone, you have seen the telegram. The Walla cavalry will suddenly launch an attack, saying that they are preparing to kill their way out. Now their leader Yes Hen is also moving here. Then should we completely keep them here, or should we let them live to prevent both sides from suffering losses? Let's discuss this matter. Su He, as the general with the highest military rank and the highest rank, was naturally the best choice to preside over the meeting. As soon as his voice fell, the commanders looked at each other, not knowing what to do. From a psychological point of view, after fighting with the Walla army for so long, of course they wanted to completely keep them here to prevent future troubles. But now was really not a good time. The snow was too thick, and it greatly affected the movement speed of the army. Moreover, the other party's military strength was not ordinary, and their combat strength was quite strong. If they were to fight head-on, not to mention that they might not be able to keep their lives, their losses would definitely not be small. Yang Qindong had already sent out a notice to the entire army. After this battle they had to take a break. While the army rested and replenished, the migration of the civilians also had to be carried out. They would only attack the Ili region after the snow melted in spring. And if everyone suffered heavy losses now, it would delay the important matters after spring. What should they do? Among the commanders there were very quickly two opinions. Some people said that they should use this opportunity to completely eliminate Yes Hen. This was a great enemy that the five-star army rarely faced. If they were eliminated, the 5-star army would no longer have any opponents in this grassland. From a long-term perspective, this was appropriate. Chapter 1271. There were also some people who said that there was no winner in a head-on clash. If they really fought with the Walla army this time and both sides suffered losses, or even greatly damaged their vitality, then when spring came, how would they attack the inner region? How would they accomplish their goals? It was not worth it to give up a large piece of land for Yes-hen, who was like a stray dog. Both opinions had their own supporters and both had their own reasons. When Su-he gathered all the opinions, he was in a dilemma. In the end, his gaze fell on Bai Shuang. After this battle, this person would take up the position of commander. He was in existence on the same level as him, so it was not shameful to listen to his opinion. Of course, Su-he knew whether or not he was using Bai Shuang's name in private. This person was Yang Qindong's student. Even if his decision was wrong, Yang Qindong would not blame him too heavily. So he did not have to be careful. As Yang Xie's territory grew larger and larger, the 5-star army became more and more powerful, and Yang Qindong's position became more and more noble. Anyone who faced him had to be careful. This was the aura of a superior. Bai Shuang did not think too much about it. Perhaps it was because of his status that he did not need to worry about these things. He had other thoughts in his mind. Even if Su-he did not ask him, he would have said it himself. He took this opportunity to say, "This general has a few opinions. Right now the war has just begun and no one can predict what will happen next. Why don't we prepare for both sides?" Prepare for both sides? Hearing Bai Shuang's words, everyone looked at him with confusion. Yes, prepare for both sides. Bai Shuang said with certainty, "First, we naturally plan to destroy the Walla's main force, or even capture or kill Yes-hen. We still have to do the necessary charge and support. The foreign race's first army will still be blocked. If we can heavily injure them and find an opportunity, we will move out with our entire army and crush them. Secondly, if there's no turning back and the Walla armies will to fight to the death is obvious, and they've always held the initiative on the battlefield, then we should give up on fighting them head-on, and weaken the enemy's strength as much as possible without losing our own strength. If it's really impossible, then we should just let them leave. The future is long. If we can beat them away today, then we can defeat them in the future and wipe them all out." Two different opinions were put forward at once. Their considerations were taken into consideration by the officers. After everyone heard it, they all nodded in agreement. There were even some people who thought in their hearts, as expected of Wu Nanking's student, he has a very thorough understanding of the 4 words discretion. Su-he, who was sitting at the head of the table, also nodded in agreement. Previously, he thought that Bai Shuang was directly promoted to commander because he was Yang Qindong's student. Now it seemed that this opinion needed to be changed. This person was indeed very capable, and he might be able to take up the position of commander. Bai Shuang's opinion received everyone's agreement. Then this opinion was reported to Yang Qindong. Soon a telegram was sent back to deal with this matter. Not long after, the foreign race's first army also received the telegram. Su Ku, who was going to be demoted after the war, after seeing the telegram, he only thought for a moment before saying to his 4 division commanders, "Everything will be done according to the telegram. We will use all our strength to stop them. If we can't catch them, then let them pass by us." "No, commander." The 301st Division commander, Tu Hai, immediately objected. "Commander, this is an opportunity for the foreign race's first army. If we can stop the Walla army and even capture their leader, Yes-hen, it will definitely be a great achievement. Maybe you won't have to leave. In order to achieve this goal, even if we have to sacrifice our entire army, it will be worth it." "That's right, military commander." The other 3 division commanders also expressed the same opinion. Su Ku's army was obviously very capable. At least he quickly won the support of his 4 division commanders. Looking at the expectant gazes of the 4, Su Ku's heart was very moved. However, he wasn't moved. He knew that it was his negligence and arrogance that caused the army to lose the opportunity to fight. And now it was time to make up for his mistakes. If he ignored all the soldiers of the foreign race's first army for his own selfish reasons, even if he could stop Yes-hen in the end, it would still be a failure. He couldn't destroy the entire foreign race's first army for his own selfish reasons. Su Ku's heart was firm. "Okay, I'm still the commander. Carry out my orders." The commander's authority was inviolable. Since Su Ku had said so, Tu Hai and the others had no choice but to carry out his orders. However, they had already thought it through. They would do their best to stop the Walla army from breaking out. If there was a chance, even if both sides suffered losses, they would still try to stop the enemy. The Wala cavalry's charge was still ongoing. Although the war horses couldn't display their usual speed due to the snow, and the pressure from the arrows increased, Bomir didn't have any intention of stopping. He knew that if they couldn't break out today, once the 5-star army's 30,000 cavalry arrived tomorrow, it would be even more difficult to retreat. There are still 4 hours before the sky turns dark. The leader will also join us. At that time we must kill our way out. For this, we must do it no matter the cost. He repeated the importance of this battle to the deputy general beside him. Then, as if he had just remembered something, he asked, "General, how is the situation on the other side?" "General, the news from there is that everything is fine. The 5-star army's cavalry didn't have enough momentum. It seems like they are very afraid of death." When the deputy general answered this question, there was a trace of disdain in the corner of his mouth. Bomir could see that this person was looking down on the 5-star army. His expression changed for no reason. "What do you know? The 5-star army isn't afraid of death. They just don't want to pay a huge price. I even suspect that they have already seen through our goal." "What? That can't be right." The deputy general had a look of disbelief. "There is nothing impossible about it. I have long heard that the 5-star army has a type of metal that can achieve the purpose of rapid communication. In other words, the news of the leader meeting us is very likely to be known to them. Our abnormal attack must have aroused their suspicions," Bomir said with a heavy expression. When he first heard about this matter, he still had a look of disbelief. However, the 5-star army's reaction speed on the battlefield had already proven this point. After saying this, Bomir didn't look at the deputy general, who was so shocked that his mouth was agape. Instead, he looked back at the map in front of him. He was thinking about whether there were any loopholes in their next move. On the other hand, the attacks of the new army on the west side were indeed not that fierce. With such a thick layer of snow, once they started charging, they would definitely not be able to increase their speed. This allowed the archers, who were on the defensive, to have more space to display their skills. Knowing that it was dangerous and still having the soldiers charge, no general with brains would do such a thing. However, this didn't mean that they wouldn't do anything. It was inevitable for soldiers to be sacrificed on the battlefield, but the most important thing was how to make the most of their value. If they couldn't make enough difference, Su He, Bai Shuang, and the others couldn't accept such a way of dying. "I think we should wait until nighttime. Once the first Wala cavalry can't hold on any longer, the Wala army will have to charge out from there. At that time, the 50,000 Wala cavalry will definitely retreat. While they are retreating, we will launch an all-out attack. At that time, even if Yeshen and the others can escape, we still have to make them stay. No matter what, we have to tear off a piece of meat from them." In the tent, the one who spoke was Bai Shuang. Seeing that he was going to become the commander of an army after the battle, he didn't dare to underestimate his words. "Of course, whether or not we can make these 50,000 soldiers stay will ultimately depend on whether or not the First Army can seal their pockets. Commander Su, I'll need you to communicate with them about this matter." After Bai Shuang finished explaining the general military plan, he patched up the last loophole, but this time he looked at Commander Su He. Although Bai Shuang could communicate with the First Army of the alien race directly with his current status, because of what happened before, he was likely to take up a new position. It would not be good for him to jump out at this time and give orders. It would give people the impression that he was exercising his authority before he took up the position. After thinking about it, Su He, as the army commander, was more suitable. Su He understood Bai Shuang's intentions and knew that this was for the sake of the big picture. He nodded and said, "Okay, I'll use the radio to contact Senior Colonel Su Ku." He used to address Su Ku as Commander Su, but now that things had changed, it wasn't appropriate to address him as commander, especially in front of Bai Shuang. Instead, it was more appropriate to address him by his rank. Soon, Su He's telegram was sent to the headquarters of the First Army. Su Ku didn't reply immediately after reading the telegram. He was weighing the pros and cons in his mind. However, Tu Hai, the commander of the 301st Regiment, who was beside him, immediately tossed it aside after reading the telegram. With a displeased expression, he said, "We are all military units. What right do you have to order us around?" They didn't think of a way to launch an attack and rendezvous with us to launch a pincer attack. Instead, they wanted us to open up a path and let the enemy's general go just so they could finish off the 50,000 cavalrymen who were left behind to block the road. We can't agree to this kind of thinking. Chapter 1272. Tu Hai's words were naturally to vent the anger in his heart, as well as to speak up for Su Kuda. After all, he was now the favorite of the military chief with a lot of power and autonomy. Who knew if Bai Shuang would still be the same after he took over? Would he find a chance to get rid of Tu Hai himself and replace him with someone else? This wasn't Tu Hai measuring the stature of a gentleman with his own yardstick. This kind of thing could be said to be the norm. In order to better control the army, most military chiefs wouldn't allow their subordinates to have different opinions. Otherwise, if they really fought a war, how could they unify the command? But no matter what Tu Hai was thinking, Su Kuda's demotion from commander to regiment commander was already set in stone. Unless Yang Qindong retracted it, no one could change it. For example, Su Kuda now accepted this fact. He was now thinking about how to fight his last battle as a commander. At the very least, he couldn't leave this mess in the hands of his successor, Bai Shuang. Commander Tu, what's the situation at the front? Su Kuda ignored Tu Hai's complaints and went straight to the heart of the matter. Military chief. When it came to serious matters, Tu Hai didn't dare to be the slightest bit arrogant. He hurriedly replied, "Right now the 304th Division is at the front. Commander Kang Biao is personally commanding the formation, but I heard that they also suffered some losses. The Walla cavalry seems to have gone crazy, charging non-stop. They are also using the tip of the arrow formation. If it wasn't for the heavy snow affecting their speed, I'm afraid our losses would be even greater." This wasn't the first time Su Kuda had heard such a report. Previously, the 302 ND Division's commander Luan Xiaojiang and the 303 RD Division's commander Sensei Naganabu had both reported to him that the Walla army's attacks were extremely fierce. There were a few times when they almost tore a hole in the front line. The various divisions had also suffered heavy losses. From the looks of it, the Walla army had truly risked their lives this time. It was likely that the First Army alone would not be able to keep them here. Thinking of what Yang Qindong had said in the telegram, "Deal with the situation as you see fit," Su Kaida couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Pass down the order. Tell all divisions to do their best to resist. If they really can't, don't fight them head-on. Let them pass and wait with the new army and other forces to surround the 50,000 Walla army cavalry. Su Kuda finally gave the order, but when Tu Hai heard it, he said with a face full of dissatisfaction, "Why should we? All right, Commander Tu, the facts have proven that we can't stop the Walla army from breaking out of the encirclement. Do you really want the first army of the non-human kind to be wiped out?" Anger finally appeared on Su Kuda's face. Although he was unwilling, he knew that the bigger picture was more important. He also knew that if he didn't act this way, Tu Hai would continue to persuade him, and he was afraid that he would change his mind. Seeing that Su Kuda was truly angry, Tu Hai didn't dare to say anything more. He could only stand at attention and salute, then find someone to pass down the order. The resistance of the first army of the non-human kind became much weaker because of this order. When the news reached Beaumure's ears, he let out a long sigh. "Very good. In less than 2 hours the sky will be completely dark. The leader will arrive at any time. Send out scouts. Once the leader arrives, immediately guide him to meet up with us. Then send out the 5,000 death squads to open a path of blood and prepare for the leader's departure." The sky wasn't dark yet, and the wind was even more chilly. However, no one seemed to feel it. Instead, they all stared with wide eyes, waiting for the arrival of the final battle. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, the scouts came back with news. They had already received the leader Yes Hen from Turpan. Not only that, General Chao Lu had also arrived with 20,000 cavalry. When he heard that his side had an additional 35,000 cavalry, Beaumure suddenly had a bold idea. They currently had the advantage in numbers, and the 5th Star Army's 30,000 cavalry reinforcements would only arrive a day later. Then, could they use this opportunity to do something? For example, surround the 5th Star Army and eliminate them? When this idea appeared in Beaumure's mind, he felt a surge of blood. When the Deputy General asked him if he should send the 5,000 death squads to the battlefield, he didn't immediately reply. General? Seeing that Beaumure was silent for a long time, the Deputy General couldn't help but call out twice, afraid that he would miss the opportunity to break out of the encirclement. "Oh, send them out." Beaumure's thoughts came back and he finally gave up on the idea of surrounding the 5th Star Army. Although this plan was indeed very tempting, the strength of the 5th Star Army wasn't to be underestimated. He couldn't guarantee that they would be able to eliminate the 80,000 5th Star Army in a day's time. If they couldn't, once they were entangled, once the 5th Star Army's reinforcements arrived, it would be difficult to escape. And even if they could defeat the 5th Star Army, the Walla Army would suffer heavy losses. This wasn't a good deal at all. What they wanted now wasn't to eliminate the 5th Star Army, because they simply couldn't do it. What they wanted was to get away from here. Only in this way could they better develop themselves. This required them to bring out enough elite cavalry to be the cornerstone of their future development. If one more person died here, it would be a huge loss to their future. Putting away the unrealistic thoughts in their hearts, the 5,000 Walla cavalry charged out. They all had the thought of death on their faces as they rode forward with difficulty in the dark night. From time to time, they would wave their swords to block the incoming arrows. Although their speed wasn't fast and they suffered heavy losses, no one retreated. The first army of the outsiders had been fighting for half a day. Seeing another Walla cavalry brigade appear, and not only did they not dodge the arrows, they even dared to shoot back at them. Both sides suffered some losses in a short period of time. They aren't human at all, they aren't afraid of death. Commander Kang Biao of 304 saw the Walla cavalry getting closer and closer and couldn't help but sigh. He had to admit that among the opponents of the 5th Star Army, the Walla cavalry's combat strength had always been superior. Many times, the 5th Star Army had to be very careful when fighting against them, otherwise they would likely suffer heavy losses. Come, report the situation to the commander. Seeing that the Walla cavalry was getting closer and closer, the shooting would soon turn into a close combat. Kang Biao quickly ordered people to ask for instructions. Should they really fight with them regardless of the losses, or should they open a path for them to pass through? In just a few minutes, the order was passed down. They opened a path for the Walla cavalry to charge through. Obviously, Sukuda gave up on the idea of both sides suffering heavy losses. He avoided the spearhead and looked for an opportunity to wipe out a portion of the enemy. For some reason, Commander Kang Biao, who received this order, actually felt relieved. He wasn't someone who was afraid of death, but he felt that this kind of fighting method was meaningless. There wouldn't be a true winner in this kind of war, and it would only benefit a third party in the end. The first army of the foreign races finally opened a path for the Walla cavalry to pass through. When the news came, Bomur had just met up with Yeshen and the others. He was overjoyed and took advantage of the cover of the night to rush through the opening. During this process, whether it was Yeshen or Bomur, they didn't mention Tai Chin. It was as if they had forgotten about this person and his 50,000 Walla cavalry. Speaking of which, it wasn't that they were careless or that they really forgot. It was because they knew that there would always be someone left behind to deal with the 5-star army. If they all wanted to retreat once the 5-star army met up, they would be able to chase after them. This would create more variables for them to escape. As a result, when a large number of cavalrymen escaped through the gap that the First Army had purposely opened, General Tikian and his nearly 50,000 cavalrymen became miserable. They became children that no one wanted, lone wolves on the grassland. The Walla army's main force escaped without notifying Tai Chin. This news was discovered by the First Army of the foreign races in time. They immediately used the radio to inform the new army and other departments. Suhi and the others who received the news were all confused. The Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division's commander, Dai Qua, said something that made everyone very alert. Could it be that the Walla army did this on purpose, leaving them to wait for us to surround them and attack them from behind? That's not possible. Hearing this, the other military commanders all had a look of panic and didn't know what to do. Instead, Bai Shuangshuang's eyes quickly spun a few times and suddenly said with some joy, "Maybe the Walla army is cutting off their tail to survive. They are afraid that we will not let them go, so they intentionally left behind 50,000 cavalry to restrain us." But that's 50,000 cavalry. Is Yeshen really willing to let them go? He was somewhat convinced but also somewhat doubtful. Teacher once said that Yeshen is an ambitious and ruthless person. This kind of person is willing to sacrifice anyone for his own safety. 50,000 cavalry is very strong, but compared to Yeshen's life, what is it? How about this? I suggest that we join forces with the First Army to surround the 5-star army. However, we don't need to take the initiative to attack. Instead, we can rely on the thick snow to fire arrows from afar and restrain them here. This way, if Yeshen wants to surround us, we will have the advantage of the terrain and sufficient energy to deal with him. At the same time, we can use the smallest price to persuade the 50,000 Walla cavalry to surrender. Bai Shuangshuang's thoughts turned quickly. At this moment, he had become the commander of an army, so he didn't consider the small matters in front of him, but the big picture. Chapter 1273. Hearing this suggestion, Suhi's eyes also brightened. Good idea. We encircle but don't attack. Once they want to fight back, we are not unprepared. We can only encircle and use bows and arrows to deal with 50,000 cavalrymen from afar. We can achieve the greatest victory with the least cost. I agree. Even Su He agreed, and several other military officers expressed their opinions one after another, expressing their agreement. A telegram was then sent to Su Ku. Su Ku was originally rejoicing because the Walla cavalry that escaped through the gap he opened was not 50,000 like the telegram said, but 70,000. The sudden appearance of Chao Lu's 20,000 cavalry was something no one expected. Facing so many cavalry, if the First Army desperately tried to stop them, they would be in danger of being completely annihilated. In order to save himself, the First Army would certainly launch a fierce attack with all their might. In that case, not only the First Army of the non-humankind, even the First Army of the non-humankind wouldn't be able to defeat a few of them. Yang Qindong had probably thought of this result, which was why he said to deal with it at his discretion. While his heart was palpitating, he received Su He's telegram. He immediately tightened his pockets and quickly approached the 50,000 Walla army. In less than 2 hours he had completely surrounded them. At this time, Pai Qin also received news that the Walla's main force had retreated. In his tent, he immediately fainted in anger. After a group of subordinates rescued him, he slowly woke up and cursed, "Bomur, you're too weak." Then he fainted again. When Pai Qin woke up for the third time, the 5-star army had completely surrounded him. Pai Qin's face was pale and he didn't speak. His eyes were empty as he looked forward, as if he had nothing left to live for. He had thought that Bomur valued him very much. Not only did he not care that he had been defeated in the previous battle, but he had also taken the initiative to give him 50,000 cavalrymen. This made him feel that he had great power in his hands and was looking down on the world. But who would have thought that in less than a day he would become an abandoned pawn? At this moment he finally understood why he was given 50,000 men. It was to lower his guard, and at the same time, it was also a gift to the 5-star army. It was to make them focus on him and not move away. That's right. 50,000 cavalrymen. How tempting. Thinking about the number of troops in his hands, he felt a burst of comical feeling. But on the other hand, if it wasn't for the fact that he had left behind so many soldiers for him, why would he be willing to risk his life here? Even when the sky had turned dark, he didn't rush Bomur, but instead kept waiting. Wasn't it because he was confident that someone would abandon him and his 50,000 cavalrymen? But now it seemed that he was wrong, completely wrong. Now that he had 50,000 soldiers in his hands, he did not have the slightest bit of fighting spirit. He was already someone who had been abandoned. Even if he won the battle, who would see it for? As for declaring himself king, did he think that the 5-star army around him were incompetent? Thinking about the problem of food, he quivered and asked the personal guard beside him, "How much provisions do we have in our army?" "General, this time we came out in a hurry. Previously, General Bomur had said that we would retreat at night, so we didn't bring too much provisions. We only have 2 days' worth of provisions." When the personal guard answered this question, his gaze was somewhat evasive. Clearly, he had also thought of a certain possibility. What? Only 2 days? Hearing this result, Pai Qin immediately felt his vision go black, and he fainted again. The 5-star army surrounding them did not know that he had fainted a few times. At this moment, they were setting up an encirclement to prevent the 50,000 Walla cavalrymen from escaping. At this moment, the army urgently rushed to set up barricades. All the caltrops in the army were scattered all over the ground. Strong bows were in hand, and the quiver was full of arrows. They were just waiting to close the door and beat the dogs. According to the analysis of Bai Shuang and the others, the Walla cavalrymen who knew everything would most likely launch a counterattack that night. It would be best if they took action before the 5-star army's encirclement was completely solid. This way the chances of them escaping would be higher. But they never expected that the night would be peaceful. The next morning, the Walla army was still as calm as usual. It was as if they did not know that they were surrounded. Such an abnormality made Su He, Bai Shuang, and Su Ke confused. They could either break out of the encirclement or surrender. But what did they mean by doing nothing? If it wasn't for the scouts using high-powered military binoculars that allowed them to see countless Walla soldiers moving around inside the tent, and if it wasn't for the scouts who reported that the other party had indeed fled far away and was running all the way, it didn't seem like they were going to come back for a surprise attack. Everyone couldn't help but wonder if they had surrounded an empty tent. Since the Walla army was not moving, the 5-star army had no reason to move. They only needed to continue waiting. When night fell, Narasong and the 30,000 cavalrymen would arrive. This way, even if the enemy had any ideas, they would be able to deal with them calmly. Unexpectedly, the 50,000 Walla cavalrymen did not move. It was as if they did not know that they were heavily surrounded. In reality, he was already lying on the bed. After being angered to the point of fainting, he was in a deep sleep. Since their commander was not awake, the remaining generals did not know what to do. Soon there were two different opinions among them. The first was the surrender faction. They believed that the situation had changed and even their leader didn't want them anymore. Whatever they did now couldn't be considered a betrayal. There were many foreign races and surrendered troops in the 5-star army, but weren't they doing well? The second was the fight to the death faction. A man would rather die standing than live kneeling. The only one who died was them. Besides, if the 50,000 cavalrymen charged in the same direction, they would have a chance of survival if they were lucky. However, these two factions did not give way to each other. The surrender faction was waiting for Narasong to wake up. The fight to the death faction considered that they did not have enough manpower. Rushing out like this was no different from courting death. They were also waiting for their commander to wake up and give them orders. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. Narasong's condition did not improve. He was still in a coma and had a high fever. More importantly, the food brought by the army was about to be used up. Apart from a few generals, many soldiers had begun to rely on the snow to fill their stomachs. If this continued, their combat strength would only decrease. However, they did not think of counterattacking when they were in a good condition. Now, they did not have the ability to do so. The 50,000 Walla cavalrymen persisted like this. However, under the encirclement, their every move was under the surveillance of the 5-star army. Especially when they saw that they were so hungry that they had to rely on the snow to survive, the 5-star army also gave up on the offensive strategy that they were halfway through researching. From the looks of it, they could completely trap the enemy. Since that was the case, why bother to attack? Using this time, the 5-star army also rested. Unless they sent out the necessary defensive troops, they also began to hand over the necessary handover. Just like the handover between Su Kuda and Bai Shuang. A commander was directly demoted to a regiment commander. Although it was said that he was going to enter the illustrious 1st Cavalry Division, it was still unpleasant to the ears. Thus, Su Kuda only gave Bai Shuang all the relevant personnel information and the general situation of the army before leaving. Bai Shuang was also smart enough not to ask any more questions. He was someone who had gained a huge advantage. Right now, anything he said would only embarrass the other party. For the sake of Su Kuda's face, he kept his mouth shut. He also handed over some information about the situation of the 4th Regiment to the other party and watched as he left. It was rare for the handover to be so sloppy, but none of the insiders said anything. After Bai Shuang received the information and appointment, he went to the foreign race's 1st Army and met with Tu Hai and the other 3 division commanders. In comparison, Bai Shuang was the youngest. If he had never trained in the army, it would be difficult for him to convince the others even if he had a strong backer. In fact, Tu Hai and the other 3 division commanders were already prepared to take Bai Shuang down a notch. They were already division commanders, but now they actually wanted a regiment commander to lead them. It was impossible to say that they did not have any resistance. However, what surprised everyone was that when Bai Shuang met with the 4 division commanders for the first time, he only used a short sentence to end everything. In my hand is a telegram personally issued by teacher. This cannot be changed. If anyone is still unconvinced, you can argue with me. You can also apply to leave the foreign race's 1st Army. However, if you still want to stay here, then shut your mouths and perform well. If any of you have any problems, don't blame this commander for not showing mercy. Of course, if your abilities are not bad and you have made contributions, this commander will still be fair in his rewards and punishments. Alright, all of you are dismissed. In the future, use your actions to prove yourselves. This was the first time they had met, and this short sentence left Tu Hai and the others at a loss. They originally prepared some questions, but they were unable to voice them. Didn't Bai Shuang already say that? If you argue with me, then you are applying to leave your current post. Thus he will grant you your wish. The newly appointed commander would definitely receive Yang Qindong's support. This was without a doubt. Otherwise, how would they carry out their work? Not to mention, Bai Shuang was Bugnam of Gojoseon's student. In terms of relationship, the division commanders were far from him. They wanted to find trouble with Bai Shuang partly because they wanted to cry out for Su Kuda, and partly because they wanted to intimidate Bai Shuang and let him know that he was not strong enough to lead them. In the future, when there were military operations, they should respect their opinions more. However, Bai Shuang did not buy it at all. In an instant, the 4 division commanders looked at each other, shook their heads and left the tent silently. This matter quickly spread and even reached the ears of Yang Qindong, who was in the palace of Turpan City. He immediately smiled and said to Beta Persei beside him, This student of mine is very opinionated. He can also distinguish between priorities. Not bad, not bad. Chapter 1274. To be able to receive 2 compliments from Yang Qindong, by Shuang's identity as the army commander was confirmed. At this moment Yang Qindong was in a very good mood. After crushing the attack of the 5 countries, the 50,000 Walla army cavalry would be in his pocket again. The next step was to wait for the snow to melt before launching an all-out attack. During this period there were still many things that he needed to do. For example, continuously sending troops to the Ili region, continuously sending the people who wanted to migrate out, and letting the people from the outside bring them in, settling them down, and dividing the land equally, etc. Considering that there were many things to do, and that the war would start again after the spring, he had to stay here to set up the formation. Yang Qindong did not plan to return to Chichen City. This time he had to be separated from his wife and children again. Chichen City. Long residence. The chief of public security, Long Tainan, was drawing Yang Duo's eyebrows in his bedroom. No one would have thought that the dignified Chief Long, who could make criminals tremble in fear, had such a gentle side. A man drawing a woman's eyebrows, this was a sign of the love between husband and wife. See Zhang Chang drawing eyebrows. Zhang Chang was from Pingyang during the Han Dynasty. During the Xian Emperor he was the governor of the capital. Zhang Chang drawing eyebrows for his wife. In the past, it was said that husband and wife had a good relationship. Later generations combined the story of Zhang Chang drawing eyebrows, Han Shou stealing a woman, Xiang Ru stealing a jade, and Xin Yu's thin waist into the 4 great romantic affairs of the ancient times. Yang Duo, who was middle-aged but still had a beautiful face, was also enjoying this feeling at this moment. From time to time, her eyes would meet with Long Tianan's and then she would smile. In an instant, the temperature of the entire room seemed to rise a lot. Okay, done. After finishing the last stroke, Long Tainan, who was bending over, laughed. Looking carefully in the mirror, Yang Duo's face showed a satisfied expression. Not bad, my husband's skills have improved again. That's true. Who asked me to have a lovely wife? Long Tainan laughed heartily after being praised. He was obviously very satisfied with this praise. In response, Yang Duo threw a smug expression, but in her heart she was happy. Long Tainan was not her first wife, and she had a past that she could not bear to look back on. She originally thought that this was the end of her life, but she never thought that she would be able to have a second spring. Moreover, the relationship between the 2 of them was really good. They loved and respected each other, which made her very satisfied. It was because of this satisfaction Yang Duo was willing to do anything for Long Tainan. Just like how she had sent a telegram to Hu Meng, the commander of the new army in the first city, for the sake of Ai Hui. She didn't know if it was appropriate, but she had done it out of love. Now that she thought about it, she had to inform Long Tainan. Otherwise, who knew if it would cause any misunderstandings? Husband, I sent a telegram to Commander Hu Meng yesterday. What? Long Tainan, who was washing his hands after putting down his brush, did not hear clearly at first. He thought that it was just a normal matter, but then he reacted. His hands that were reaching into the basin could not help but pause, and his entire body also froze. Yang Duo, who had been paying attention to Long Tainan, noticed this change. A look of heartache flashed in her eyes and then she said, I recommended Director Qin to Commander Tiger Mane. When the content was said, Long Tainan had already turned around. With a trace of nervousness on his face, he said, Madam, how can you send such a telegram? This. Why can't he? What's this? Director Qin is a talent to begin with. Didn't my husband say more than once that once he wants to lead troops into battle, he is also qualified to be a military commander? And I also know that you went to City Lord Yu Qian and Deputy Commander Lung Song of the Army Headquarters because of this matter. I saw that you were anxious, so I wanted to help you. Yang Duo naturally knew what Long Tainan was going to say. It was nothing more than that. It was best for women not to get involved in this matter, especially Yang Duo, who was Yang Qindong's 7th sister. Sometimes she had to pay special attention to what she said or even what she expressed. How could Yang Duo not know this? A woman's virtue was to have no talent. Wasn't this a sentence that those scholars often said? However, she also knew that they were in Yang Xie's world now. Yang Qindong had said that men and women were equal. Since they were equal, why couldn't she do what men did? More importantly, she saw that Long Tainan had been busy because of this matter. She really wanted to help. After thinking about it, she simply sent a telegram to Commander Tiger's Mane in her own name. Of course, Yang Duo wasn't someone who didn't know the importance of things, especially now that Yang Xie's territory was getting bigger and bigger. As Yang Qindong's seventh sister, the weight of her words naturally became heavier and heavier. Therefore she also specially sent a telegram to Yang Qindong, directly removing Long Tainan from the list. She only said that Qin Feng was a good person and a good seedling to be a general. She recommended him out of fairness. Yang Duo only knew that her husband was anxious because of this matter. As for what would happen after these two telegrams were sent, she didn't care. This was the willfulness of women. It was also the willfulness of Yang Qindong's sister. It must be known that even Yang Qindong's wives wouldn't speak about the appointment of a general because this involved a matter of principle, and that was that the harem couldn't interfere with politics. Yang Duo was Yang Qindong's sister. She wouldn't care about such things. She just did what she thought. What could she do? Long Tainan was a little speechless by Yang Duo's words. After his expression changed again and again, he finally returned to his previous gentle state and said, "Well, since the telegram has already been sent, then it's too late to say anything. It's just that Qin Feng is really a talent. Yes, this is a recommendation. Sixth brother should thank me." Yang Duo raised her head proudly and looked as if she was doing this for the public. Long Tainan saw this and could only bitterly smile. He knew that Yang Duo was helping him. How could he refute it? Besides, he was also wholeheartedly dedicated to the public. He was really recommending talents. At least as far as he knew, none of the candidates recommended by the military and the city lord's mansion could compare to Qin Feng. Qin Feng, the head of the operations department of the Ministry of Public Security, was a person with great power in the Ministry of Public Security. At the same time, he was also a young talent that Long Tainan appreciated very much. Despite the great migration, the proportion of natives in the land was very small. However, there were still some people who were unwilling to let the country die and did some small things in private. It was just that because the number of people was limited and the scale wasn't very large, it was naturally not good to send the nearby garrison to deal with this kind of movement. Therefore, this kind of thing was put on the Ministry of Public Security. This made them have an extra unit of the operations department in order to deal with these people who were always restless and would even use weapons to resist Yang Xie's forces. When it was first established, Long Tainan suppressed all the opposing opinions and entrusted Qin Feng, who was only 24 years old, with the heavy responsibility of becoming the head of the operations department. According to the military rank, he was directly given the rank of colonel. Facts also proved that this person didn't disappoint Long Tianan's expectations. In the past 2 years, dozens of big and small attacks eliminated many opposing forces under Yang Xie's forces, giving the people a stable society and space for development. For this, Qin Feng himself also made a lot of contributions and finally received the rank of colonel. This made him in the limelight in the Ministry of Public Security for a while, and he almost reached the height of Long Tainan, the chief. However, he was only less than 20 years old. With this kind of contribution, he couldn't be promoted in the Ministry of Public Security anymore. He couldn't give the position of chief to him. Even if he was a talent, because of the environment, he couldn't be promoted anymore. As a result, Qin Feng, who had made great contributions several times in a row, was given the title of Vice Chief of Public Security. This was already the limit. Because of this, in order to not delay this person's development, Long Tainan decided to send him to the military. This way there would be room for improvement. This time, it just so happened that the new army was going to be changed into a new army group. Seeing that there were 3 army commander positions, he had an idea. For this matter, Long Tainan threw away his old face and went to look for City Lord Yu Qian, Deputy Commander Leng Song and the others. Unfortunately, the effect wasn't very good. This didn't mean that Qin Feng wasn't capable enough or that his contributions weren't enough. It was just that he was still too young. If he was allowed to take the position like this, what would happen to the other senior people? Thus, Long Tainan only wrote Qin Feng's name in the recommendation letter from the Ministry of Public Security and then prepared to resign himself to fate. However, everyone knew that it was difficult to obtain such an important position just by relying on the recommendation of the Ministry of Public Security. This was where his worry lay. He didn't expect that Yang Duo would see it all. Then she made a move. However, she was afraid that she wouldn't get permission, so she acted first and reported later. Originally, Yang Duo was prepared to tell Yang Qindong in person when he returned to Qian City for the new year. However, there was already news that the war in Qian City was tense and he might not return this new year, so she simply sent a telegram to express her intentions. Yang Duo didn't want her husband to worry too much. In addition, Qin Feng was indeed a talent, so she directly sent 2 telegrams in her own name. When the telegrams were received, Yang Qindong just glanced at them and put them aside. He casually said to Beta Persei, "My seventh sister is even recommending talents. Alright, go and check it out later and see who this Qin Feng is." After receiving the order, Beta Persei immediately nodded and went out to send telegrams to Yang Wu, who was staying in Qian City, and Yang San, who was the director of the security bureau. Since it was something that the young master was concerned about, it was not a small matter. In the beginning city, Tiger's Mane, who also received the telegram, revealed a helpless expression. The establishment of a new army was no longer a secret. With the help of the logistics commander, Yang Si, the soldiers had basically gathered, but the commander had not been completely decided yet. This gave Tiger's Mane, who was about to become the commander, a headache. Chapter 1275. Facing the three commanders' positions, the various factions all scrambled to sign up, and there were more than 40 candidates. At this point in time, Yang Shi wasn't as weak as before. His territory was enormous, his population was numerous, and his level of wealth had already arrived at a state that no one could compare to. Because of this, many internal factions had appeared. At first, they just wanted to protect their own interests and strengthen themselves. As they won more and more battles, their territories grew bigger and bigger. Conflicts of interest were inevitable. Among them, a few major forces had enough foundation and could influence many decisions and policies without anyone noticing. The most powerful of these factions were the three factions. The first was the elder faction. For example, Tiger's Mane, the Yang family's servants, and some important factory managers and founders. Even though there were not many of them, they all occupied important positions. The second was the Cold Front faction. This was the elite of the elite, equipped with the best weapons and the best soldiers. Their strength was unimaginable. The third was the Red Nest faction. They mainly developed in the rear, acting as the main camp and supporting the development of the army. As Yang Xie developed, it also developed itself. Most of the time, even Yang Qindong had to consider their feelings when making certain decisions. The fourth was the Surrender faction. There were all kinds of talents among them, but it was undeniable that they had all joined the Yang faction from other factions for various reasons. Many of them had been forced to join, but as time passed they settled down and became Yang Xie, especially the backbone of the five-star army. There were actually differences among the four major factions. For example, the Crimson faction was also divided into the local faction, the old people in Crimson City, the Great Ming faction, the talents from Northern Ming and Southern Ming, and the Foreign faction, the talents from outside Crimson City and Great Ming who came to Crimson City to develop. Apart from this, there were also some smaller factions such as the Grassland faction, the Vietnamese faction, the Laotian faction, the Korean faction, and so on. It could be imagined that in the future, there would be the Japanese faction, the Ili faction, and many other factions. Yang Qindong was naturally aware of this, but in order to maintain a balanced relationship, he would not interfere unless it was too strong and threatened him. Where there were people, there would be Jianghu. Where there were benefits, there would be conflicts. This was something that no one could avoid. And with these relationships, it was impossible to be on good terms with all of them, but generally speaking he had to get along with them. Just this time alone, almost all the major and minor factions had been mobilized for the position of the three army commanders. As long as there were such talents, they would constantly recommend them. Those who didn't have such talents were also recommended by the other faculties. They agreed to share the benefits. As the commander of an army, how much influence would he have if he obtained this position? How many officer positions would he be able to arrange? Just thinking about it made people envious. Because of this, Tiger's man had the biggest headache. As the new commander of the army, what he needed to do was not to be impartial. He needed to select the best talents and entrust them with important tasks. He also needed to balance the relationships between all parties. At the very least, he could not allow people to criticize him for any major problems. For a moment he had a headache. But things had to be done. Soon, 2 candidates were submitted. After the review they were basically approved. They were only waiting for the final order from the army headquarters. They were the 101st Army's commander, Lu Zhua, and the 102nd Army's commander, Ke Lu. Regardless of whether it was in terms of experience or ability, it was obvious to all. If they were promoted, no one would be able to say anything. But no one would have thought that such a problem would still occur. Division Commander Ke Lu was implicated by the new army's commander, Su He. He was given a warning and could not be promoted for half a year. This meant that he would miss this good opportunity. With one less competitor, Tiger's man said that he had one more choice. At this moment, Yang Duo's telegram was delivered to his desk. When this telegram was delivered, there was an attachment. It said that the same telegram was also delivered to Yang Qindong. Tiger's man could not ignore this. Who was Yang Duo? She was the young master's sister. As a servant of the Yang family, she was his master. At the same time, Yang Duo was also the only person from the Yang family that the young master brought to Chichen City. Just based on this relationship, Tiger's man could not ignore it. Not to mention, the matter had already been reported to Yang Qindong. He did not dare to be careless. I have an impression of this Qin Feng. He was the candidate recommended by the Ministry of Public Security. We have also investigated him. He is quite capable, but he is too young. He is not even 27 years old. Tiger's man looked at the telegram and looked at Qin Feng's name. He could not help but say. Of course he was not talking to himself. He was talking to Yang Si. They were both servants of the Yang family. Their relationship could not be compared to that of ordinary people. In particular, Yang Si was now the commander of the logistics department. In terms of power and the number of management personnel, he was no less than the commander of the first group. Regarding the important matter of selecting a commander, he called Yang Si over to discuss it. Yang Si did not speak at the moment. Instead, he held his chin and looked at Tiger's man as if he was looking at a rare animal. This kind of gaze had a hint of scrutiny, which immediately made the latter raise his eyebrows. I say, why are you looking at me like that? Are you looking for a kick? In the world, other than Yang Qindong, only Tiger's man could say that to someone like Yang Si, that he was looking for a kick. They were both servants of the Yang family. Tiger's man could be said to be the boss and the immediate superior of everyone. Of course, he did not really want to kick anyone. It was just a kind of joke to show intimacy. However, there was a certain degree of pressure. At least, Yang Si, who was afraid of being kicked, immediately became serious. Tiger's man, don't talk about age. Young master is not even 30 years old. Ah. This sentence was said by Tiger's man. He was stunned. Yes, Yang Qindong was born in 1430. It would be half a month before he turned 30 years old. Looking at the group of servants, they were not old. None of them were over 30 years old. But which one of them did not hold great power? Yes, we shouldn't judge people based on age. But who are we? How can Qin Feng compare to us? Tiger's man was still a little unconvinced. Yes, Qin Feng can't compare to us, but he won't be too far behind. He was recommended by Miss Seven, and this matter has been reported to the young master. I think we should keep this position for now. If my guess is right, it won't be long before the young master receives news. We just have to wait. As for the last commander position, we have to decide quickly. After all, the three armies can't be without a commander for a day. Yang Si was able to become the logistics commander and manage the relationships between all parties very smoothly. He was a person with a clear mind. That was why he had such an analysis. Naturally, whether it was Tiger's man or Yang Si, with their status, they only had one master in their eyes, and that was Yang Qindong. As long as they served the young master well, they did not have to care about other people's opinions. But the problem was that this was recommended by Yang Duo. Even the young master would have some misgivings, so it was not up to them to think too much. Regarding Yang Si's ability, Hu Meng could be considered to be very familiar with it. Hearing him say this, he nodded and said, Okay, since that's the case, we will leave a position. Now let's discuss the last commander. At the end of December, 1460 was coming. It was only a few days before the 5-star army, and good news came one after another. First, the heavily surrounded 50,000 Walla cavalry finally chose to surrender. Their commander, Taiyin, also died of a serious illness due to his poor health. In the end, his subordinates chose to surrender to the 5-star army. To be able to become Walla's elite cavalry, their strength was very good. As long as they changed their mindset once they joined the 5-star army, they would definitely be a group of elite soldiers with decent strength. These people did not need to undergo any systematic training at all. As long as they adapted to the military rules of the 5-star army, they would quickly become qualified soldiers. This was equivalent to having an additional 50,000 reserve troops. For the 5-star army that entered the Yilabali area, this was a force that could not be ignored. Second, the scouts had sent back accurate information. Under the leadership of Yes Hen, 60,000 Walla cavalry crossed the Altai Mountains and entered the northern grasslands. This kind of decision to leave in a hurry already proved that they were afraid of becoming enemies with the 5-star army. It was believed that as long as this trend continued, they would not dare to become enemies with the 5-star army. This indirectly meant that when the 5-star army conquered the Yilabali area, there would be one less strong opponent. Third, the new army would be officially established a few days later on the 1st of January 1460. The commander of the army, Tiger's Mane, had 3 armies and 1 division directly under him. Each division had 4 divisions, each division had 4 regiments, a total of 33,600 people in each army. The army had about 118,000 combat personnel, logistics personnel and mechanical personnel. Commander Tiger's Mane, 101st Army Commander Lu Zhua, 102nd Army Commander He Chong, who was selected from countless people. He had served as a squad leader, platoon leader, company commander, battalion commander, and deputy commander in the Cold Vanguard Army. He later served as the deputy chief of staff in the army headquarters, 103rd Army Commander Qin Feng, recommended by Yang Qindong and approved by Yang Qindong, and the new division directly under him, Deng Yu. Fourth, the migration of 2 million people from the Yangtze provinces were entering the first city in batches. From there, they would gradually replace the people in the Yilabali area and become the new owners of the area. Everything seemed to be in order. Yang Qindong's territory was Lufan City. Once this area was occupied, it would become the capital. Now, a lot of boulders and cement were being transported to the city. They were just waiting for spring to start building the city. At this moment, Yang Qindong looked like he was going to go to war and would not stop until he occupied this area. This posture also made Yilabali, Turkmenistan and Yarkyang very nervous. After the 5-star army failed twice, the Wala cavalry left and the Kazakh army retreated in fear. At this time they no longer had any outside help. Chapter 1276. Before this, the 5 countries working together did not cause any problems for the 5-star army. Now that there were only 3 countries left, they were even more terrified. Seeing that the 5-star army might launch a large-scale attack, after a series of discussions, the 3 kings decided to ask for help from the Kazakh Khanate. Not only that, but they also asked for help from the Aries dynasty. Needless to say, Kazakh was connected to the Ili region, and they were in danger of dying. After the 3 countries promised to provide grain and a certain amount of gold and silver, even if it was for their own safety, they had to send troops once more. The Aries dynasty was the predecessor of Iran. Under the leadership of Wuzong Hasan, they had just defeated the Black Goat dynasty. They were at the peak of their military strength and wanted to expand outwards. The 3 countries took the initiative to ask for help while paying a certain amount of gold and silver. This was what Wuzong Hasan wanted, and they quickly came to a decision to send troops. King Hassan was born in a Turkmen noble family and believed in the Sunnis. He knew the Qur'an and was familiar with Turkic, Persian and Arabic. He worshipped martial arts and was brave and smart. Since young, he had ambitions that were different from normal people. At this moment he had just dealt with the Black Goat dynasty, and his strength was at its peak. The number of cavalry under him had reached 300,000. Raising these troops for nothing was a huge financial burden, but he could not find a suitable target to attack all of a sudden. Now that the 3 countries had sent themselves to his door, how could he not take it? Both sides agreed that after the Aries dynasty opened up, they would move towards the 3 countries and work together to fight the 5-star army. The year 1460 had finally arrived. During the new year, the various troops gathered here. Yang Qindong drank and chatted with the various generals in the palace. This was a rare gathering. Yang Qindong took the opportunity to adjust the deployment of the army and formulate a military plan for the annexation of Yilianli. This time, the higher-ups of the 5-star army who attended the banquet had 5 people. They were the 1st Cavalry Division's Tiger's Man, the new army's commander Su He Shi Wanshan, the 1st Race's commander Bai Shuang, and the 2nd Race's commander Niu Duo. Apart from that, there was the Mongol Alliance Army's commander Narasong, 30,000 cavalry under him, the 4th Division Lung Feng, the Liaodong 1st Cavalry Division's Dai Qua, and some other direct regiments. All in all, the 5-star army had gathered up to 200,000 troops. This did not include the 150,000 captives from the past few battles and the 100,000 reserve troops sent by Yang Si, the logistics commander of the first city. With these sufficient reserves, no matter which army or division suffered losses in the following battles, they would be able to quickly replenish their losses. This was something that the other powers could not compare to. Not only that, Turpan, Baisbali and Hobak Seri had nearly 2 million civilians from the other provinces of the Yang family. They were waiting for the 5-star army to take over the new cities and redistribute the new lands after their victory. Taking advantage of the 3 months of continuous heavy snow, Yang Qindong had made all the preparations. He had also accumulated a large amount of military supplies in the 3 cities. Once they were ready, he would be able to wield his troops and be invincible with just one order. Compared to Yang Qindong's ample preparations, the three countries did not surrender without a fight. After failing to send envoys to make peace, they also contacted the Kazakh Khanate and the Aries dynasty respectively. The former decided to send 100,000 troops, while the latter sent 150,000. If one added in the troops of the three countries, the total number was close to 1,000,000. Another huge war was unavoidable. In the banquet, everyone only drank and talked. The atmosphere was not bad. On the second day after the banquet, when everyone arrived at the military conference hall in the palace and saw Zhang Xian's sand table in front of them, all the military officers' faces turned solemn. Yang Qindong was still dressed in a clean green robe, holding a thin and sturdy pointer in his hand. Before he even opened his mouth, he had already attracted everyone's attention. Generals, our intelligence department received important news a few days ago. The Ili region, Turpan and Yarkiang tribes have already secretly asked for help from the Kazakh and Aries dynasty. After paying a certain price, they have already persuaded the two countries to send 200,000 cavalry to fight a decisive battle with our 5-star army. Apart from this, the three countries have each recruited 50,000 soldiers. If we add it all up, our opponents this time are close to 1,000,000. Yang Qindong's voice resounded in the conference hall. When the generals heard this, their faces all turned red in excitement. Generals who led soldiers to war were not afraid of battle. The more enemies there were, the more merits there would be, and the more opportunities they would have to show off. Seeing the generals' high fighting spirits, Yang Qindong was also very happy. He had not expected the Aries dynasty to suddenly jump out. His original plan was to head west and fight whatever he saw, but he did not know where to start. Now, the Aries dynasty and the Kazakh Khanate had both taken the initiative to jump out. This was the best thing that could happen. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with the general's fighting spirit and morale. He raised the pointer in his hand, and the conference hall immediately became quiet again. This time, we only have more than 200,000 soldiers, and we have to face an opponent that is at least 3 times our number. I want to say that everyone must be cautious and not be arrogant and underestimate the enemy. Of course, the fact is not that scary. We have already investigated. After 2 conscriptions, the men of the 3 countries are all gone. In other words, they do not have the ability to conscript again in a short period of time. However, we are different. We have a solid rear. For now, we have more than 200,000 reserve troops. At the same time, there are 100,000 foreign soldiers from various provinces gathering in the logistics headquarters in the beginning city. They will soon set off for us to be our solid backing. Everyone, there is no need to hold back in the next battle. When you see the enemy, just fight. Beat them fiercely until they surrender. Beat them until they are convinced. As for the inevitable sacrifices in the process, I only want to say that no matter how much you lose, you will be replenished. If a battalion is wiped out, you will take another battalion. If a division is wiped out, you will take another division. In short, you can only advance and not retreat. Those who do not listen to military orders and are afraid of the enemy will be dealt with according to military law. Do you understand? Yang Qindong's face was serious, and his eyes flashed with a cold light. The generals of the 5-star army were all veterans. They should not be afraid of the enemy, but they still had to be clear about the rules. Therefore, when Yang Qindong's cold eyes swept across the crowd, everyone raised their heads, puffed out their chests and answered loudly, "Understood." Very good. The new army will be the vanguard in the middle, the new 5-star army will be the left vanguard, the first outsider army will be the right vanguard, and your third army will be the vanguard. After the battle begins, all of you will be the vanguard. If you see a city, you can go around it and leave it for the middle army to deal with. In short, charge into the enemy's forces as fast as you can and turn them upside down. Lung Feng's 4th Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, the Mongol Alliance Army and Liaodong's 1st Division, Dai Qua, will be in the middle army with me. While supporting the vanguard, you will be in charge of attacking the enemy's cities. The 2nd Outsider Army will be in charge of logistics and backup, and be ready to join the battle at any moment. Orders after orders came out of his mouth. All the generals who were called out stood up straight and answered. The entire meeting room was filled with a sense of nervousness and majesty before a huge battle. 3 Eastern Province. This was a huge province that had just been established half a year ago. It was responsible for protecting Liaodong, developing agriculture and logistics. As the great general, Yi Ligang had a heavy responsibility. In just half a year, he had clashed with the Baiming army in the Liaodong region more than 10 times. He had suppressed them to the south of the logistics line and ensured that the five-star army had enough supplies. As a surrendered general, Yi Ligang was entrusted with a heavy responsibility. After obtaining sufficient military and financial power, he also fully demonstrated his talent. After personally commanding several battles, he also established enough prestige in the army of the three eastern provinces. In the past 6 months, it was also the happiest 6 months in Yi Ligang's life. He could finally exert his strength without any restrictions. Watching the army become stronger day by day under his own integration, and seeing that the people had food to eat and clothes to wear this winter under Yang Qindong's policy of not collecting agricultural taxes for 2 years, he felt infinite pride in his heart. Wasn't this the life he had always wanted, the life he had always wanted to see? He did not expect it to come true like this. In comparison, looking at the Ming civilians living outside the three eastern provinces, they were still the same. They did not have enough food and clothes and they were still suffering. At this moment, Yi Ligang only hoped that Bugnam of Gojoseon could quickly solve the problems in the Ili region and return to Liaodong to save more Han civilians. With such thoughts in his heart, Yi Ligang had been working hard. Together with Governor Lu Ji, they did their best to manage the three eastern provinces and increase their strength. It was the new year. After Yi Ligang paid a visit to Governor Lu Ji in the morning, he returned to his own residence and celebrated the arrival of the new year with the people in the Yi residence. He firmly believed that each year in the future would be better and stronger than the previous year. However, just as the entire residence and city was celebrating, an uninvited guest suddenly appeared outside the Yi residence. Under the lead of the unattractive butler, he came to Yi Ligang's study room. Chapter 1277. At this moment, Yi Ligang's face no longer had the happy smile he had during the new year. There was only a cold expression. Especially after the person was brought in front of him, he said with a frosty expression, "I really didn't expect that Tongji Dai would travel thousands of miles to come to our remote place during the new year. He really put a lot of thought into this." Standing across from Yi Ligang was the Ming embroidered uniform guard's commander, Dai Qing. Dai Qing and Yi Ligang were old acquaintances. In the past, Dai Qing was a small official in the embroidered uniform guard in the new Ergon Dusi district. Later on he went to the capital. However, he didn't expect that when he came back he was already a lower third-rank official. Hearing Yi Ligang's words, Dai Qing's face was filled with displeasure. He was a member of the embroidered uniform guard. During the Great Ming dynasty, regardless of whether it was the nobility or the ministers or the commoners, their faces would change at the mention of his name. In the past, Yi Ligang was only an insignificant commander. Seeing him, not only was he not afraid, he even dared to mock him. This made Dai Qing's face very uncomfortable. Following this, he didn't wait for Dai Qing to invite him and found a place to sit. "You can leave first." Looking at the housekeeper standing outside the door, Yi Ligang lightly waved his hand. Although Dai Qing was an unwelcome guest and should have been taken down on the spot, since he had come, Yi Ligang was very curious about what he wanted to say. So what if he left him alive for a while? There were no outsiders in the room. Yi Ligang's face became very serious. "Speak, what business do you have?" Dai Qing didn't mind Yi Ligang's lack of respect. He had already thought about this when he came. Moreover, in the Great Ming dynasty the Taijin guards and the Eastern faction guards were very majestic. In reality they were looked down upon by many people on the righteous path. They could only survive in the darkness and were hated by everyone. However, despite knowing this, Dai Qing still had to come. This was an order from above. If he didn't come, there was only one path left: death. If he came, perhaps there would be a glimmer of hope. "General Yi, let's not beat around the bush. This time, I came on the orders of the emperor to persuade you to turn back." "Oh, that's right, I have a letter that eunuch Gao wrote for you." As he spoke, Dai Qing reached into his bosom and took out a well-wrapped letter before handing it over. The so-called Gao Gonggong was the supervising eunuch of the Ming Imperial Horse Directorate, Gao Rang. He was also a eunuch with a high position and power. In terms of status he was second only to Jining. Yi Ligang naturally knew this person. In the past, he would think of ways to give some salary to these supervisor eunuchs during festivals. This was not to say that he wanted to surrender to the other party, but to prevent the other party from finding trouble with him. Who said that she had to do something just because she gave him a gift? It was already very fortunate that these eunuchs were not looking for trouble. Since the other party had written a letter, Yi Ligang opened it with the thought that there was no harm in reading it. He had even thought that he would definitely turn these letters in when he returned. At this time, his heart was completely focused on Yang Xie. Seeing that the people had already seen the hope of a better life, he would not allow anyone to destroy or take back all of this. Yi Ligang held a firm belief in his heart, but after reading this letter, his expression changed again and again. At this time he was no longer as full of confidence as before. This was because this letter recorded some of the matters of Song Quan's family. Song Quan had once been the commander of the new Ergon capital region and had been Yi Ligang's immediate superior. It could be said that he had taken good care of Yi Ligang. When the 5-star army had arrived at the city walls, he had not hesitated to commit suicide to save Yi Ligang's life and give him a great merit. In Yi Ligang's heart, Song Quan was his blood brother. His blood brother's family was naturally his family, not to mention that he had promised Song Quan before he died. Not to mention that Yi Ligang did not have a family now. Even if he did, if someone threatened him like this, he would not be moved at all. In his heart there was always a balance. But if it was Song Quan's family, it was very different. He was willing to die for this promise. From this letter, it could be seen that Song Quan's family had been threatened by Gao Rang or even deeply. If he did not agree to the other party's request, he was afraid that the family would not have a good ending. With the usual style of the embroidered uniform guard, there was no need to say anything about not harming the family. Yi Ligang's expression changed again and again. At this moment he was somewhat out of his wits. When Dai Qing saw this, a gloomy smile flashed across his face. In this world, everyone had a weakness, and the embroidered uniform guard were people who were good at finding this weakness. Now he was even more certain that this mission should not be difficult to complete. At this moment, in an adjacent alley outside the Yi residence, the figure of the Yi residence's housekeeper appeared. After making a few turns, he arrived in front of a small courtyard and gently knocked on the door. Then the door opened and the figure flashed in. Yi Ligang did not know where the housekeeper went, but at this moment he did not care at all. After carefully reading the letter 3 times, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Dai Qing with a fierce gaze. He said, "What do you want?" This was a negotiation. Dai Qing's face showed a happy expression. He clasped his hands and said, "General Yi, you are the pillar of our Ming army. You must understand the principle of a fine bird choosing a tree to nest in. This time Eunuch Gao wants you to know the way back and lead the army back to Ming's embrace. As long as General Yi does this, the emperor will be very happy. At that time, a high position and a good salary will be just around the corner." Dai Qing pretended to congratulate Yi Ligang, as if Yi Ligang was about to soar to the top. But Yi Ligang did not dare to believe a word of this. What emperor's expectation? All of this should be Gao Rang's doing. Using the son of an old friend to threaten people, such a trick could only be done by the embroidered uniform guard in the East faction. But knowing this, how should he choose? If he agreed, he would violate his oath and life goal, and he would betray Yang Qindong's trust in him. If he did not agree, he would betray the dead Song Quan. It was a dilemma and he could not make a decision. Dai Qing looked at Yi Ligang's hesitation and did not mean to urge him. He was a eunuch with a certain degree of cultural foundation and knew that more haste, less speed. This time he came to put pressure on the other party, and did not expect to force the other party to speak. This time he mainly came to inform the other party. He believed that after some time he should know what to choose. "Okay, the letter has been delivered. I will come back in 3 days. At that time, I hope General Yi can think clearly and make the wisest decision. Goodbye." Dai Qing also knew that this was the territory of the 5-star army. It would be inconvenient for him to stay here for a long time. He did not wait for Yi Ligang to speak and turned to leave after saying this. Just like when he came, Dai Qing deliberately wore a cotton hat. It was a common thing to wear in the cold 3 northeastern provinces, but it could better cover his face. When he walked out of the Yi mansion, he intentionally looked left and right. When he did not find anything out of the ordinary, he walked away with large strides. To be able to become a member of the embroidered uniform guard, he had undergone a certain amount of harsh training. To be able to become a lower 3rd rank official like the commander, Dai Qing's skills were not bad. However, what he didn't know was that there was always someone stronger. In terms of skills, the people of the 5-star Army's intelligence bureau were not much worse than him. Especially the people of the action team, their abilities were not weak. Just as Dai Qing thought that he had left the Yi residence without anyone noticing and was heading towards the place where he had landed, a commoner carrying firewood was following him from a distance. After following him for 3 streets and seeing him enter an inconspicuous courtyard, he quickly turned around and headed back the way he had come. Not long after, the firewood seller appeared in front of the Yi mansion's housekeeper and another young man. Manager, I found the corner. It's a secluded courtyard on the South Street. Very good, immediately bring people to keep an eye on that place. The young man who was called the manager nodded in satisfaction. Then he said to the housekeeper beside him, you should go back. You've been out for a long time, don't make people suspicious. Okay. After the housekeeper agreed, he quickly pushed open the door and left. The manager's eyes flashed with a light. After standing there for a while, he turned around and walked into the depths of the courtyard. Yi Ligang probably didn't know that when Yang Xie gave him this mansion, including the housekeeper and servants, there were many spies. It was still the same saying, don't doubt the people you use, even if you suspect them, use them. Originally, Yi Ligang didn't have a family. His parents and brothers were no longer around. For such a person, how could he not take any precautions when he could use him? Not only was he prepared, but the Yang Xie Security Bureau's stronghold in the 3 eastern provinces was near the Yi mansion to prevent any accidents. Unexpectedly, there was actually someone who came to find Yi Ligang. Although the housekeeper didn't know the identity of the other party, the words Dai Tongji already exposed a lot of problems. At the very least, this person wasn't a Yang Xie person. From his official position, it was very likely that he was a Ming official. The manager's surname was Ning and his name was Gang. As the highest level existence of the Security Bureau in the 3 eastern provinces, his main purpose was to find out some military information about the Ming army and to become enemies with the brocade gown guards. Yang Qindong had never been careless about the brocade gown guards. To be able to become such a notorious existence, whether it was in history or movies, was enough to prove their influence and destructive power. It was because of this that Yang Qindong had long ago entrusted the Wolf Fang Special Forces to send instructors to the Security Bureau and the CIA. A real intelligence officer should be proficient in both the pen and the sword. Especially as Yang Xie's territory grew bigger and bigger, there were likely to be more and more tricks in the dark. He had to be prepared. Chapter 1278. Money and manpower were Yang Qindong's biggest advantages. Whether it was the Security Bureau or the CIA, they had developed strongly over the years, and many outstanding talents had emerged. Ning Gang was one of them. He graduated with excellent results in the graduation examination and stayed with Director Yang San for half a year. After his vision and thinking had been greatly improved, he was finally demoted and became the intelligence director of the Security Bureau in the 3 eastern provinces. Previously, he had sent people to obtain some military information about the Ming army through various means. Once he was even praised by the higher-ups. However, he had never fought with his old rival, the brocade gown guards. So, many of the things he learned could not be used. Now that they had finally appeared, Ning Gang was very excited. Ning Gang, who had studied systematically, knew that it was often times like this that he had to remain calm. When he thought of Director Yang San's calm choices in the face of various situations, he forcibly suppressed the urge to arrest them. The founder of the Security Bureau was, without a doubt, Yang Qindong. He had performed many similar tasks in his life and was familiar with this aspect. He selected some selected training, improved it, and handed it over to Tiger's man. Later, Yang Qindong was promoted by the deputy director and learned a lot from Yang Qindong. It could be said that he had completely inherited the mantle. As one of the students that Yang San was very satisfied with, Ning Gang naturally would not be too bad. He knew that the brocade gown guards was a powerful organization. Once they appeared, they would not be alone. In order to complete the task, they often did not even form a team. Usually they would have a backup plan. His task was to find out all the members of the brocade gown guards that had appeared. He absolutely could not leave a little bit of trouble behind. If they wanted to do this, they would have to rely on Dai Tongji. At this time, Dai Qing did not know that he was being watched. In the past, he had also come to the Liaodong region for missions and secretly dealt with some disobedient officials. There had never been any problems. Now these people only had a change of master, but the place had not changed. What was there to be afraid of? Without the slightest precaution, Dai Qing only made a few necessary anti-tracking actions. After finding nothing unusual, he returned to his temporary residence and met the 6 brothers who stayed here. Sir, you're back. Did everything go well? Seeing Dai Qing return, a man about 25 or 26 years old with long eyebrows like willows and a jade-like body quickly came up to greet him. This person's surname was Yao and his given name was Shi. He was the person that Dai Qing valued the most. No matter where he went, Dai Qing would bring him along. However, very few people knew that although Dai Qing looked very masculine, he had different preferences from others. This Yao Shi was the person he liked the most. There were many things that he would not tell others, but he would never hide them from Yao Shi. Therefore he was the only one among the 6 who knew the rough details of the mission. As soon as he saw Yao Shi, Dai Qing's heart skipped a beat. Since he was in a good mood, he naturally spoke more casually. I've talked to him. There shouldn't be any problems. However, we still need to make another preparation. If he doesn't agree after 3 days, prepare to kidnap him. It doesn't matter if he's dead or alive. This is the consequence of betraying the Ming. How about this, go inform the other team and have them prepare to act at any time. No matter what, Dai Qing was still a commander in the embroidered uniform guard. There were many people with status who knew him. Although he had disguised himself, it would be best if he did not appear in public. It would save him a lot of trouble. This time, if it wasn't to gain Yi Ligang's trust, he would not have personally come. However, he would never have thought that he had already been exposed. In his opinion, Yi Ligang would definitely not report this matter to the 5-star army for the safety of Song Quan's family. Even if he wanted to report it, it would not be so fast. Therefore he should be very safe right now. The other operation team had 20 people. They were all highly skilled in martial arts. Once they used force, it would not be a problem for them to kill their way into the Yi residence. However, only Dai Qing and Yao Shi knew about the existence of this small team. It was not convenient for him to appear, so he could only send his confidant. Be careful on the road. This is Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory. Although he did not think there would be any safety issues, Dai Qing still reminded Yao Shi. Yes. Yao Shi agreed with a smile. He then went into the central room and put on a thick coat, wrapping his entire body in it. Seeing that there were no more problems, he left the courtyard under Dai Qing's watchful gaze and headed straight for another settlement. Yao Shi's level was far worse than Dai Qing's. He was only chosen because of his good looks. In terms of professional level, he was too far behind. After he was discharged from the hospital, he only nervously looked around. When he did not see anything special, he went to the location of the other team. Behind him, at least 3 secret agents of the Security Bureau were alternately following him. The sky finally darkened. In the inconspicuous courtyard where Ning Gang lived, a large group of agents of the Security Bureau had already gathered. At this time, each of them had their chests puffed out and their eyes shone brightly as they waited for the final order. After an afternoon of investigation, the group of embroidered uniform guards, a total of 27 people in 2 locations, safely fell into Ning Gang's line of sight. After repeatedly confirming that the embroidered uniform guards did not have any backup plans, Ning Gang decided to make his move. He also wanted to know the purpose of the embroidered uniform guards. Although through ordinary observation this Yi Ligang was still very trustworthy. However, if something were to happen, it would be better to capture him and personally ask him. Teams 1, 2, 3 and 3 are responsible for capturing people. Teams 4, 5, and 6 are responsible for internal security. In the event of an accident, help at any time. Teams 7, 8 and 9 are responsible for the outermost security. Team 10 is responsible for secretly watching. In the event of an accident, immediately contact the 5-star army stationed in the city and seal off the 4 cities. In short, not a single embroidered uniform guard is allowed to escape. Ning Gang looked at the 10 operation team captains standing in front of him with a trace of killing intent in his eyes as he spoke. A team of 10 people, a total of 100 operation team members. This was the armed force in Ning Gang's hands. Other than that, he also had an intelligence team and a tracking team under him. In the event of a major incident, he also had the authority to mobilize the nearby troops at any time. Ning Gang had mobilized all the operation team members just to capture 27 embroidered uniform guards. This was how careful Ning Gang was. He deeply remembered what Director Yang Qindong had said before. This was also what Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong had taught them. As a qualified intelligence officer, succeeding 99 times was not something to be proud of. This was because as long as you failed once, all your previous efforts would be wasted. Therefore, every mission had to be completed with a 100% commitment. Even a lion would use all its strength to catch a rabbit. Each team received the mission and received the blueprints of the 2 courtyards from the intelligence team. After a thorough understanding and a reasonable plan of action, everyone set off at the designated time and went straight to the 2 targets. In the courtyard of the first target, Dai Qing was holding Yao Shi. The 2 hadn't started doing anything yet. They were resting on the side of the bed. Yao Shi tried his best to say nice things to please Dai Qing, but for some reason the effect was not good today. His backer, who was also his direct superior, was always absent-minded. This was the fundamental quality of a special agent. They were born with an extremely strong sense of danger. For some reason after dinner, Dai Qing always felt his heartbeat become unstable, as if something big was going to happen. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure it out. He looked down at Yao Shi, who was still smiling at him in his arms. Dai Qing asked in an absolutely gentle tone, "When you went out today you didn't notice anything else, right?" "No, what else could there be? No one here will recognize me." Yao Shi shook his head and said innocently. Yao Shi had not joined the embroidered uniform guards for long, and his ancestral home was in the south. In Liaodong no one knew him. He didn't even have an old friend. So there shouldn't be any problems. Could it be that he was thinking too much? How could Dai Qing know that the problem was him? Instead, he was the one who implicated Yao Shi? Dai Qing couldn't think of a reason, so he stopped thinking about it. Instead, when he looked at Yao Shi, his eyes revealed a fiery expression. Filthy words came out of his mouth. "Little darling, the night is long." Just when he was about to do something, his ears suddenly moved. He seemed to hear a muffled sound in the courtyard. Who is it? As expected of a middle-level cadre in the embroidered uniform guards, he instantly exclaimed. Following this shout, the door was suddenly kicked open from the outside. Then 2 shadows pounced on him from the left and right. "Ah!" Yao Shi, who had already taken off his shirt, cried out in alarm when he saw this scene. Dai Qing, who was also half-naked, reacted immediately. He grabbed the pillow in his hand and threw it out with a whoosh. Taking advantage of the moment when the headrest was thrown away, his body leaped out like a spirit fox, rushing out of the room and landing in the courtyard. It was when he entered the courtyard that Dai Qing's expression froze. At this time he noticed that there were 5 men in black standing in front of him. They were surrounding him in a semicircle. Who are you people? In his heart, he knew that he had encountered a thief. In front of these bandits who killed without batting an eye, his so-called embroidered uniform guard name might not be useful. So after saying this he added, "If you are looking for money, I am willing to give you money. Since you are outside, please make things easy." Chapter 1279. Cut the crap. Capture him. I want him alive. The leader of the 5 people was Ning Gang. He was worried about the situation here, so he personally led the team here. At the same time, this was his first time dealing with the Imperial Secret Service, so he wanted to test the other party's strength. When the 4 team members beside him heard the supervisor's words, they rushed forward without another word. However, in order to capture him alive, they abandoned their weapons and rushed forward with their bare hands. What a good Dai Qing. Facing the 4 people rushing at him with a half-naked body, he was fearless. His fist was like the wind as he met them head-on. With a dull thud, the operation team member staggered back 3 steps, revealing an opening. With one punch, he forced an operation team member to retreat. However, Dai Qing's expression also froze. Although he did not use his full strength in that punch, he still used 70% of it. He originally thought that he would be able to send the person flying, but he only retreated 3 steps. It seemed that the other party did not come with good intentions and was not weak. In the blink of an eye, the other 3 team members rushed forward together. For a moment, punches and kicks rained down on Dai Qing's body like a storm. Dai Qing, who protected his head with both hands and his key parts, took several fierce punches. Taking advantage of the opponent's first wave of attacks, before the second wave of attacks came, his body suddenly rushed in one direction. With a mountain lean, he knocked one of the operation team members to the ground. Then with a long leg sweep, he knocked another team member to the ground. After that, he extended his free hands and smashed towards the last team member. This series of reactions happened in the blink of an eye. The remaining operation team member kept retreating. His hands kept moving in front of him to protect himself, and at the same time, he wanted to dissipate the power of Dai Qing's attacks. After 3 consecutive punches, he still did not knock the opponent down. Dai Qing was anxious. He did not know how many tricks the opponent had. He could not delay and had to end the battle quickly. At that moment he stopped abruptly. Then he raised his right leg and kicked the side of the team member's head with great force. Fortunately, the team member was somewhat prepared and protected his head. However, the powerful force still made him retreat continuously. Bang! Dai Qing, who had just finished his kick and was about to rush out, was suddenly knocked down to the ground by a long leg sweep. It was Ning Gang, who had not made a move until now, who had finally made his move. This kick was extremely fast. Dai Qing was unable to react in time and suffered a loss. However, his skills were extraordinary after all, and he had experienced countless life and death battles. Therefore, the moment he fell to the ground, he took the opportunity to roll like a donkey, then flipped over and quickly stood up. Dai Qing had just steadied himself when another fist came crashing down. Out of instinct, Dai Qing countered with a punch. Then, with a muffled bang, a great pain came from his fist. He couldn't help but take 4 steps back before he could stand firm. Needless to say, the one who attacked was Ning Gang. Since his first attack had failed, he would throw another punch. What he wanted was to seize the absolute initiative. After launching a kick and a punch, Ning Gang had already entered the zone. His body was as light as a swallow as he leaped up and launched a chain of 3 kicks at Dai Qing, who was still retreating. Tong tong tong, there were several fierce attacks. When Dai Qing felt that both his arms were in so much pain that he couldn't even lift them up, he suddenly felt a pain in his legs. It was still a long leg sweeping attack. Once again he was hit and fell to the ground. After falling to the ground twice in a row, Dai Qing's body was no longer as nimble as before. It was impossible for him to stand up in a short time. Taking advantage of this time, the 4 action team members who were repelled by him before pounced on Dai Qing, who was on the ground like fierce tigers. Soon, his limbs were pressed firmly and he could no longer move. At this time, the other 2 action team members in the bedroom had already escorted Yao Shi, who was also naked, out. Looking at the performance of the 2 men, Ning Gang, who was still calm and agile just now, couldn't help but stare blankly. Then he shook his head. At this moment he already knew what had happened. He couldn't help but feel nauseous. The arrest operation was very smooth. Under the surprise attack, the action team of the Security Bureau suddenly made a move and ended everything in just 2 hours. 13 of the 27 embroidered uniform guards were killed on the spot, 7 were seriously injured, and the other 7 were captured. In the dungeon of the Security Bureau's branch in the 3 eastern provinces, the interrogation had already begun. As the protagonist, Dai Qing was locked up alone in a room. At this time his eyes were dull. Even now he still couldn't figure out what the problem was. He didn't suspect Yi Ligang. He had already done his research. He was a man of honor and would never betray him and put Song Quan's family in danger. About an hour passed and finally, there was a sound outside the prison door. Ning Gang and the others appeared in front of him. The 5 captured embroidered uniform guards were tortured and all of them spoke. However, they didn't know what this person wanted to do. They only knew that it was to complete a secret mission. As for the specific details, they didn't know at all. Therefore, even though they wanted to speak and even talked about many secrets of the embroidered uniform guards, none of them were related to this operation. The final mission still fell on Dai Qing's head. As soon as Ning Gang appeared, Dai Qing raised his head and looked at him with the help of the candlelight. Then he let out a snort and turned his head to the side. He knew very well that the people outside didn't know about the mission at all. Even Yao Shi had only informed the other party that they were going to take action. They only knew about the general mission and it didn't matter. Seeing Dai Qing's uncooperative behavior, Ning Gang wasn't anxious. On the contrary, he looked at him with interest. Then he chuckled and said, "You don't want to talk, right? It's fine. I hope you can hold on. If you want to kill me, then kill me. I'll still be a good man after 18 years. At this moment, Dai Qing showed a fearless expression. Still a good man after 18 years? Not bad. But I don't know if you can hold on until then to bring him here. Ning Gang wasn't surprised. If the other party spoke after a simple inquiry, it could only mean that there was no one else in the embroidered uniform guards that could be used. After this shout, the bare-chested Yao Shi was quickly brought over. Then he was tied to a wooden pillar at the side. When this scene fell into Dai Qing's eyes, a trace of nervousness flashed across his face. And all of this was seen by Ning Gang. This was his trump card. He had already guessed before. Then he found out from the mouths of the other embroidered uniform guards that Dai Qing and Yao Shi were indeed doing something shameful. He wasn't afraid of the enemy being stubborn. He was only afraid that he couldn't find the enemy's weakness. As long as he found it, it would be time to pry open the enemy's mouth. Yao Shi was tied to the wooden frame. Ning Gang casually sat on a chair. First, he inadvertently glanced at Dai Qing and found that he was looking at Yao Shi with red eyes. Immediately, the corner of his mouth curled up and said, "What are you waiting for? Let's start the torture." No. No. 2 consecutive voices came from different mouths. It was Dai Qing and Yao Shi. Yao Shi was afraid and Dai Qing was worried. Ning Gang wasn't surprised at all by these 2 people's reactions. He looked at Yao Shi again and said, "You're so delicate. We really don't want to torture you, but there's no other way. Someone has to speak. Why are you here? Otherwise, I won't be able to report back. Okay, let's not talk nonsense. Let's start the torture. No. Yao Shi, who was afraid of being tortured, immediately shouted loudly. Then he looked at Dai Qing and said, "Save me, save me. Didn't you say that you love me very much and are willing to give up everything for me?" If these words were said by a woman to a man, everyone would be able to accept it. After all, love between a man and a woman was a very normal thing. But when it came from a man talking to another man, no matter how handsome the man was, it made people feel a sense of disgust. At this moment, not to mention Ning Gang, even the other people participating in the interrogation hurriedly looked to the side. Obviously, they couldn't accept the reality in front of them. However, at this moment, Dai Qing didn't feel uncomfortable at all. On the contrary, he looked at Yao Shi affectionately with a look of struggle in his eyes. Next, Yao Shi shouted loudly, but Dai Qing didn't speak. He just looked conflicted and reluctant. It's time to add fuel to the fire. Ning Gang thought so in his heart. Then he said to the torture staff, "What are you waiting for? Since there are people who don't care, let's start the torture." Yes. A burly man agreed. Then he raised his right hand and twisted the whip in his hand. When he saw that the whip was about to fall, Dai Qing, who had been silent, couldn't help but shout, "Don't hit, I'll talk, hit the snake where it hurts." However, no one would have thought that Dai Qing's weakness was actually a man. For the sake of Yao Shi, he finally lowered his head. Ning Gang also stood up from his chair and said with satisfaction, "That's right. Well, tell me about your mission here." Dai Qing, who had been wronged, naturally cooperated fully. He told the whole story of how he received the order from eunuch Gao Rang to persuade Yi Ligang to rebel. It turned out that what happened in Liaodu had made the acting emperor very angry. If they had only lost to the 5-star army in the war, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, who would only win and not lose in a war? However, he was angry about the performance of the officials, especially the generals who were originally from New Ergon. Didn't they say that martial artists valued righteousness and scholars despised each other? But why did so many generals and commanders choose to surrender? He couldn't figure it out. At the same time, he decided to punish these people. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone follow suit in the future? Chapter 1280. Not long after Shi Wanshan's tens of thousands of soldiers surrendered to the 5-star army, Dai Zong became even more determined. Under the instigation of eunuch Jin Ing, this task fell into the hands of the head of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Gao Rang. Don't think that the group of eunuchs would be united. On the contrary, they fought fiercely more than anyone else. Perhaps it was because they were missing some parts of their bodies, but they were especially fierce when they fought. They would often kill their opponents as soon as they made a move. After Gao Rang received this task, he immediately began to plan everything. He needed to report to the emperor. Otherwise, if the emperor questioned him, Jin Ing would add fuel to the fire and he would not have a good ending. Just like that, after a series of investigations, the final target was Yi Ligang, who valued friendship the most. Although he wanted to make a move on Shi Wanshan, who had more power, he had already taken away his family and his brother's family. Even the eunuch who was in charge of supervising them was taken away. Helpless, he could only find General Yi Ligang, who was second only to them. Although Yi Ligang did not have a family and his parents were no longer alive, based on the results of Gao Rang's investigation, he valued friendship. He especially treated his superior, Song Quan, like his own brother. Although Song Quan was dead, his family was in Ming's capital, so there was no need to fear that he would not submit. Thus, Gao Rang had people take Song Quan's family into custody and then sent one of his trusted aides, Dai Qing, to complete the task. In his view, with hostages in hand, Yi Ligang would not dare to act rashly. As long as he could convince him to take back the military power of the 3 eastern provinces, Ming would not only be able to take back the area north of Liaodong, but also cut off the supply route of the 5-star army. No matter how he looked at it, this was a great achievement. Dai Qing came. He also believed that with hostages in hand, Yi Ligang would not dare to act rashly. Thus he also brought his favorite, Yao Shi, along with him. He never thought that he would have a bad start and attract the attention of the Security Bureau of the 5-star army. Now that he had fallen into their hands, he did not know whether he would live or die. After confessing everything, Dai Qing was like a defeated rooster. He looked at Ning Gang and said, "I've said what I should say. You can kill me, but please let Yao Shi go." "Thank you." Ning Gang had a guess about what had happened, and now it seemed that he was right. However, he did not intend to let Dai Qing go, nor did he intend to kill him. If the matter was not resolved, Gao Rang would inevitably send other brocade guards to solve his problem. This time, it was due to the other party's carelessness that he was easily discovered. But what about the next time? What about the next time? He couldn't be so lucky every time, right? In order to solve this problem once and for all, there was only one way, which was to rescue Song Quan's family and send them to General Yi Ligang. This was the perfect ending. In order to accomplish all of this, it ultimately fell on Dai Qing's shoulders. In the capital of Ming, the Security Bureau also had secret armed forces, and there were spies in some key departments. It was not difficult to rescue a few people, but the difficult part was where Song Quan's family was. In the huge capital there were more than 1 million people. If there were no clues, it would be quite difficult to find them. If they were not careful, they might alert the enemy and mess things up. In order to find out where the people were being held, they could only start from Dai Qing. Dai Tongji, do you know where Song Quan's family is being held? Ning Gang, who wanted to find out all of this, asked. Don't call me Tongji. Just call me by my name. I'm now a prisoner. As for where they are being held, I don't know. I just received a mission to inform General Yi Ligang. Dai Qing shook his head and said all of this as expected. Ning Gang did not suspect that Dai Qing was lying. After all, he had said what he should and there was nothing to hide. In other words, if he wanted to know where Song Quan's family was being held, he had to think of another way. However, Ning Gang did not want to go through so much trouble. He stared at Dai Qing and said, If I let you go, do you have the confidence to find where Song Quan's family is being held when you return to the capital? Hearing that he could be released, Dai Qing's heart skipped a beat. However, when he thought about how he had answered so many questions, even if he escaped now, eunuch Gao Rang and the embroidered uniform guards would not spare him. Their family rules were very strict. I don't have confidence. The capital is too big. Finding a few people, especially a few people who are deliberately hiding, is harder than ascending to the heavens. Then what if this is General Ye's intention? Ning Gang continued to ask. General Ye's intention? Dai Qing said with some confusion. Yes, it's General Ye's intention. If General Yi wants to see Song Quan's family first to make sure they are fine, then he will talk to you about surrendering. With such an excuse, do you have the confidence to see Song Quan's family? Ning Gang's brain worked quickly, and he quickly thought of a way to solve the problem and a possibility. Dai Qing thought about these words and imagined the possibilities, but in the end he shook his head and said, I'm afraid it's still very difficult. I may be able to see one person, but I won't see everyone. Moreover, eunuch Gao is suspicious by nature. He won't let me see the Song family's hiding place casually. Speaking of which, I'm just one of his trusted aides, not his confidant. Dai Qing's meaning was very obvious. That was Gao Rang still couldn't fully trust him. He wouldn't reveal all his cards in such a matter. Ning Gang did not expect this, but it was normal. If he really was a trusted subordinate, he wouldn't have sent Dai Qing to handle such a dangerous matter. After thinking it through, he was not discouraged. Instead, he continued to ask, based on your understanding of Gao Rang, which confidant might know where Song Quan's family is being held? After thinking for a while, Dai Qing listed 3 names and said, the 3 of them are eunuch Gao's absolute confidants. He can't do this kind of thing himself. He will only give it to one of them. As for who it will be, I can't say for sure. That's enough. Hearing that he could narrow down the target to 3 people, Ning Gang's face lit up. Originally, Yang Qindong had asked about the placement of Song Quan's family. However, Ming's capital was not within Yang Xie's sphere of influence. It was not possible to find out among millions of people with great fanfare, so this matter had been suppressed. But now that there was a clue, Ning Gang would not give up. As long as he kept a close eye on these 3 people, he would not have to worry about not being able to find them. The only way to solve this problem was to bring all of Song Quan's family members to Yi Ligang's side. A rough plan quickly formed in Ning Gang's mind. When he looked at Dai Qing, he said bluntly, Dai Qing, your chance to perform a meritorious deed has come. As long as you follow my arrangements, I will not only guarantee your safety when you return to the capital, but you will also receive a reward when you complete the mission. When the time comes, you and Yaoshi can go wherever you want. Aha, the world is vast, but all is imperial land. Hearing this, Dai Qing shook his head. He thought that this was completely bewitching words. But before he could refuse, Ning Gang interrupted, wrong. In the world, Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory is not smaller than Ming's. In fact, it is even larger than Ming's territory. As long as you complete this mission, I can immediately give you and Yaoshi an identity card that belongs to Yangxia. When the time comes, as long as you are in Yangxia's territory, you can go wherever you want. At that time, you can live a carefree and unfettered life with a concealed identity. Wouldn't that be better? Of course, if you are still willing to work for Bugnam of Gojoseon, I am also willing to recommend you. Dai Qing, who originally did not have much hope and only wanted to use everything he had in exchange for Yaoshi's safety, suddenly trembled when he heard these words. That's right. Right now, the world was not just Ming's territory. There was also Nanming and Yangxia. The territory that Yangxia had conquered over the years was simply unimaginable. There were so many places that he could choose to live in. When the time came, no matter how powerful the embroidered uniform guard was, it would not be easy for them to find him. As for working for Yangxia, Dai Qing did not have such thoughts. Ever since the day he joined the embroidered uniform guard, he thought that he would never be able to leave. Over the years, he had killed countless people and was tired of this kind of life. Now that he had a new beginning, how could he return to this kind of life? Okay, I only hope that after this matter is completed, you can let me and Yaoshi leave and let us go to a new place to start anew. Dai Qing did not dare to hope for a reward. As long as he could keep his life, he was already very satisfied. Although he did not manage to persuade Dai Qing to join the security bureau, Ning Gang was not disappointed. As Yangxia grew stronger and his territory became wider and wider, there would be plenty of talents in the future. At that time, it would not be you who begged others to join, but others who begged you to join. Finally, Dai Qing was persuaded. But for the sake of safety, Yaoshi did not leave with him this time. Only he was allowed to leave the Jianghu left guard. Later, after the secret agents of the Security Bureau in Baiming and Jingming received the telegram, they kept an eye on Gao Rang's 3 confidants and made preparations. In the end, they found all of Song Quan's family members. What happened next was much simpler. The people were suddenly taken away by the Security Bureau. Then they left the capital through a secret channel and went to Shur City. In April next year they arrived at the Jianghu left guard. When they suddenly appeared in the Yi mansion, Yi Ligong was completely shocked. Originally, he had been waiting for Dai Qing to show up again. He had already thought that as long as Dai Qing dared to appear again, he would take him down and send him to the governor, Lu Ji, to prove his loyalty to Bugnam of Gojoseon and the 5-star army. Next, he would commit suicide to thank Song Quan for taking care of him. But he did not expect that after waiting for so long, he would get such a result. Chapter 1281. The person was sent over, and Yi Ligong had to be interrogated according to the law. After all, he didn't report Dai Qing's appearance to Governor Lu Ji and the relevant departments. Who knew what he was thinking? However, after the investigation, Yi Ligong's bodyguards found out that the general had ordered that the moment Baiming's brocade guard appeared, it would be time to arrest them. This proved his loyalty. After reporting to Yang Qindong, Yi Ligong was released without charge and returned to his position as the general of the eastern 3 provinces. As for Dai Qing, he completed his mission very well and brought over a member of the Song family. Ning Gang also fulfilled his promise. Not only did he release Yaoshi, but he also gave them identification documents that could be used in Yangxia's territory. He also gave them 10,000 taels of silver for their living expenses. This was enough for them to live a carefree life. Dai Qing was so touched that he knelt down to thank him. He also said that he would tell his brothers about what had happened to him through various channels. In the brocade guard, everyone knew that as long as they came, they would be part of the brocade guard in life and in death. It was impossible for them to leave. However, with him as an example, those who wanted to leave could first come to Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory and then leave. This was equivalent to giving the brocade guard, especially those who were no longer part of the brocade guard, a new way out. Because of this, who knew how many brocade guard left and how many secrets they took with them? Some of these people directly joined the security bureau to work for Yang Qindong, while others joined the army and started anew. There were also some who went to other places to become farmers or merchants. However, this matter had a great impact on the brocade guard. Not only did it not succeed, but it also caused their own troops to be disloyal. Gao Rang was often punished by the acting guardian emperor. This matter was enough to change the entire brocade guard, but it wasn't important in front of Yang Qindong. It was already the 3rd month and the snow had begun to melt. Although the weather was still fluctuating and occasionally there would be light snow or sleet, it was no longer a hindrance to the road. Yang Chendong was also going to lead the 5-star army to attack and occupy the Lili area. Over the past few months, hundreds of grain piles had been built in Turpan. They were all filled with rations to ensure that the army had enough for war. Many of the warehouses in the palace were also filled with boxes of gold, silver, and paper money. It had been 2 years since the banknotes were issued. This paper called Han banknote had a very obvious golden dragon printed on it, making it unforgettable. In Yang Xie's sphere of influence, these silver coins had gradually replaced gold ingots, silver ingots, and copper coins. After all, these things would be worn out if used frequently, but Han coins would not. As long as there was no intentional damage or tearing, it would not be wasted. Especially when there were different denominations in the banknotes. The small ones were 1 fun, 2 fun, and 5 fun, while the large ones were 100, 50, and 20 yuan. They were light and easy to carry, and were much more convenient than silver. With the Yang family bank as a guarantor, one could bring Han coins to any bank to exchange for gold and silver. At the same time, one could exchange gold and silver for Han coins. It was extremely convenient. If it was a large transaction, the Yang family bank could also release 100,000 yuan worth of banknotes. In this way, it was convenient for the commoners, and at the same time, it gradually replaced gold, silver, and copper coins, relieving the pressure on Yang Xie's finances. Even though Yang Xie was using war to support war, due to the continuous war, the pressure on his finances was still huge. If it wasn't for the fact that there were many new products that were exported, earning large amounts of money, he would not have been able to support himself until now. Furthermore, the circulation of Han banknotes had reduced the risks that might arise. Currently, all the banks in the Yang family were filled with gold and silver, greatly increasing the commoners' confidence in Han coins. With money and rations, this war was much easier to fight. Furthermore, Yang Chendong had the strongest weapons in the world as well as the most resolute army. It was only a matter of time before they swept through all 4 directions. Just like now, the 5-star army seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They were just waiting for Wu Nanking's order to launch a large-scale attack, besieging the city and capturing the stronghold to gain military merits. In comparison, the Ili Beli, Turpan, and Yarkiang tribes were having a much harder time. The commoners knew that war was coming and no one knew what would happen. In a short period of time, the price of food soared, especially the price of food which the commoners relied on for survival. In the past, 1 tael of silver could buy 2 dan of rice, and 1 dan was 94.4 kilograms. 1 tael of silver could buy 188.8 kilograms of rice. But now, 1 tael of silver could only buy 10 kilograms of rice. The price of food remained high, and at the beginning of spring, there were already signs of people starving to death. The flow of people fleeing also increased. In this regard, the kings of the 3 kingdoms could only watch, because they didn't know how long this war would last. They absolutely couldn't take out the food in their storehouses. Otherwise, how could the army win the war without food? What was worse was that the Kazakh and Aries dynasties' armies were about to enter. According to the previous agreement, the 3 kingdoms would be responsible for their food supplies. For a moment, the 3 kings were worried sick. The commoners were so hungry that they could not even eat, nor could they afford to buy food. Where would they find the strength to grow food? This was like a vicious cycle. Before the war even started, there were already internal problems, and the economic order was seriously threatened. It was said that war was a matter of fighting for money. Before the war even started, the 5-star army had already won. When the news of the 3 kingdoms reached the ears of Yang Chendong in Turpan, he keenly felt that this was a great opportunity. He immediately sent a telegram to the logistics headquarters, Yangtze, and asked him to gather more food and send it to Turpan. At the same time, he ordered the gates to be open to receive the refugees from all directions. He also said that if the commoners had money, they could use the previous price to buy food. If they did not have money, as long as they came here, they would not be allowed to starve to death. If they were willing to move to other places, they would be given a pass. After gathering enough people, they could be sent to the rear and be given food, money, and land. With this move, the south and west gates of Turpan were quickly filled with commoners from all over. They were all people living at the bottom of the food chain and did not have much savings. When the harvest was good, they could eat more, but when the harvest was bad, their food would be worse. People like these only wanted to survive. As for beliefs and dignity, who would care if they could not even eat? The sudden situation also caught Yang Chendong off guard. Originally, he thought that even if he opened the city gate and spread the food, he might not be able to recruit many people. However, when he saw the number of people increasing by thousands or even tens of thousands every day, and this trend was getting stronger and stronger, he couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, "Immediately transfer 2 divisions from the new Second Army to escort the food and be responsible for the safety of the people along the way. Quickly send these people to the rear." This sudden development caught Yang Qindong off guard, but the military operations that were supposed to be carried out did not stop. For example, the new army, the new Fifth Army, and the First Army of the foreign races still set off on time. Before the 3 commanders left the city, Yang Qindong held a short meeting and gave them a clear request. Their task was not to occupy as many cities as possible, but to attack the enemy's military strength as much as possible. Don't even think about occupying the cities. That's not something you should do. Unless there's a shortage of food, you can open the warehouses to get food. At other times, you can even abandon the captives and military equipment. In short, there's only one thing: kill the enemy. The more you kill, the better. After the 3 commanders completely understood Yang Qindong's meaning, they immediately expressed that they would kill as many enemies as possible to pave the way for the Central Army. The 3 commanders quickly left after giving a standard military salute to Yang Qindong, and then more than 100,000 troops poured out of the city. Naturally, the people of the 3 kingdoms were worried when they heard the news, especially King Harden Barter. After hearing the news, his face was full of worry, and there was no light in it. Unlike the other 2 kingdoms, King Harden Barter lost his capital and fled all the way until he lost his strength. But because of the bumpy road, coupled with the lack of strength in the front line, and the repeated defeats, when the news came, the imprisoned King Shiza fell ill and finally died 10 days ago. Before King Shiza died, he scolded his son Harden Barter for being unfilial, which made him very angry. What he did was for the good of Turpan, but he didn't expect the 5-star army to be so strong. They didn't retreat in the face of the 5-kingdom alliance, and they even won consecutive battles. In the end, the famous Yesen had no choice but to flee. Now that they were finally enlightened and it was time for war, the 5-star army's first target seemed to be him. There was nothing he could do about it. Who told Kalibi to be the closest to Turpan? After knowing that the 5-star army first sent out more than 100,000 troops, and that one of the new army's targets was Kalibi, Harden Barter called General Daichin to discuss the defense. The Kazakh and Aries dynasty's armies haven't arrived yet, and Yeshen and Urchiang have a large area to defend. What should we do now? After calling Daichin, Harden Barter immediately asked for a plan, and at the same time he showed an expectant expression. If it was before, he wouldn't have to worry about this at all, and would just wait for the other party to report. But after a few battles, Turpan didn't win a single time, and even General Daichin lost a battle. As a general who lost his capital, Harden Barter didn't have much confidence in them. Chapter 1282. Now that Tulyafin had suffered consecutive defeats, their military strength was not as good as before. Although they recruited another 50,000 soldiers, their military strength had reached 180,000, but there were too many places to defend. Facing the 5-star army, they were unable to do anything. More importantly, the civilians of Tulyafin were too close to Tulyafin city. Naturally, they were the majority of the civilians that escaped. Not only that, there were also a lot of retired soldiers that escaped. They mixed in with the civilians and entered Tulyafin city. Don't think that they mixed in just to find the base of the 5-star army. They really did surrender. Their families didn't have food to eat, their parents were old, their children were young, their wives were weak. They all needed the head of the family as a man to take care of them. These people chose to stand out to protect their families and join the 5-star army with their families. People like these who brought their families with them wouldn't go against the 5-star army, much less cause any trouble. Moreover, this situation was becoming more and more intense. The battle had yet to begin, but the army had already lost close to 5,000 soldiers. One could imagine, with their current state, how could they fight with the 5-star army? How could they fight with the enemy? They didn't have enough soldiers and their battle strength was even lower. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice. At this moment, General Daichin didn't know how to deal with this. At this moment, he really wanted to ask the king to open the granary and release the grain. However, he knew that if he really did that, not only would the civilians of Tulyafin, even the civilians of Yili and Yirkiang would come. It would also attract some unscrupulous merchants who would hoard grain at a high price. If that happened, then it would be a huge problem. Daichin thought for a long time but couldn't think of a solution. Facing the king's question, he could only lower his head and remain silent. Harden Bartle waited for a long while and still didn't get any reply. He couldn't help but ask, "General Daichin, I'm asking you something. Can you hear me? Yes, Your Majesty, I hear you. The 5-star army is coming at us ferociously. Our reinforcements won't be able to reach here in a short amount of time. The only thing we can do now is to place our main forces outside the city and defend first. Using our advantage in numbers and terrain, we can still fight. Helpless, Daiqin could only suggest a defensive strategy. He knew that if they kept defending, they would definitely lose. However, if they took the initiative to fight, they might be surrounded and split up. If that really happened, Turpan would have no trump cards left. Even if they could chase away the 5-star army one day, they wouldn't have the strength to bargain with their allies. Hardened Barter quickly understood what Daiqin meant. He couldn't help but frown. You mean that we should let the 5-star army walk past our city and wreak havoc everywhere? But do you know that if we do that, the entire Turpan will be engulfed in the flames of war and we will have no way out? Once the city is lost, there will be no place for us to stay. Daiqin obviously understood this logic, but at this moment he really didn't have any better ideas. If they split up their forces to fight, they would probably lose even faster. As for whether or not this would cause them to lose the nearby cities and large amounts of land, it wasn't a problem that he needed to consider right now. Let's solve this problem first. Your Majesty, I know your worries, but as long as Your Majesty is still here, the army is still here, and the lost land can be taken back. Furthermore, from what I see, if we gather our forces outside the city, the 5-star army might turn around and leave. After all, their numbers aren't as good as ours, so attacking the city won't benefit them. That way, as long as they leave, they might enter the lands of other allies. If that happens, some people won't be able to stand by and do nothing. Daiqin had done a serious analysis before. Right now, there were 150,000 soldiers gathered outside the city, and their numbers were above the 5-star armies. If they attacked this place, both sides would suffer losses, and this wasn't the result that the 5-star army wanted. It was very likely that they would give up on this place and go to other places such as Yilabali and Yarqiang. In that case, the two allied countries would not be able to sit on the sidelines even if they wanted to. Once they joined in, the pressure on Tulyafan would be greatly reduced. When Hardened Barter heard these words, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He finally understood his general's thoughts. This was also what he wanted. A month ago, before the ice and snow had melted, he had contacted the kings of Yilabali and Yarqiang, hoping that they would send reinforcements. This was because from various signs, it was very likely that the 5-star army's first target would be his Turpan kingdom. What he meant was that he didn't receive any response from them, as if they didn't hear his suggestion at all. It was clear that the two countries wanted to see them fight the 5-star army first, and then find a chance to reap the benefits. This was the so-called alliance. Because of the existence of their own interests, it was impossible for them to truly be united. Once there was a conflict of interests, it was very likely that they would turn against each other. Since they weren't benevolent, then they shouldn't blame him for being unrighteous. Although Daiqin's suggestion was to sacrifice a large portion of Turpan's cities, he would be able to preserve his own military strength and quickly drag the other two countries into the war to reduce the pressure on him. Why not? The most important question now was whether or not the 5-star army would attack Kalabali city. He asked Daiqin this question again, "Are you sure that the 5-star army will go around us?" They should. Even though this was the result of many analyses, who could be sure about the changes on the battlefield? Daiqin didn't dare to make any guarantees, so he added, "Your Majesty, we can act like we are going to fight to the death and give the 5-star army some pressure. This way they shouldn't attack us. Plus, if they really want to attack Kalabali city, then we can hold on for a while. When the time comes, we will have enough time to send Your Majesty away." Daiqin's meaning was very clear. No matter what, Hardened Barter's life could be saved. The only difference was that one result was that they would still be very strong, and the other result was that they would become a fugitive government that needed to rely on others. Okay, then let's give it a try. Immediately transfer the troops from the nearby cities and leave some money and food in the other cities to lure the 5-star army. Hardened Barter was very decisive. He actually didn't have any other choice. Either he immediately moved the army and gave up on Kalabali city. This way, even if he continued to escape, he would still be caught by the 5-star army. The losses wouldn't be small. Since that was the case, why not take a gamble? Daiqin was very supportive of Hardened Barter's decision. When he heard that the king wanted the other cities to leave some food for the 5-star army, he couldn't help but reveal a look of admiration. With this bait, the chances of the 5-star army not attacking Kalabali city would increase. Under the king's orders, the troops from the nearby cities started to move towards Kalabali city. The Turpan kingdom only had 180,000 troops. Other than the 30,000 troops that were too scattered and couldn't gather due to the distance, the other 150,000 troops were all gathered in and outside Kalabali city. The military tents stretched for 10 miles, as if they were ready for a decisive battle once the 5-star army arrived. The ones that came from the middle were the new army. After General Suhi heard the information from the scouts, mainly from the intelligence department, he immediately made the decision to go around Kalabali city and attack the smaller cities with weaker defenses. Before they came, Yang Qindong had said that this time, they weren't going to take over the city or see who took over the most territory. What they wanted was to destroy the enemy's strength. Since that was the case, Suhi wouldn't be stupid enough to fight with the Turpan kingdom's main force. Plus, he really didn't care about a single Kalabali city. Suhi's new army was the closest 5-star army to Kalabali city. Even he suddenly took a detour, so the 5-star army and the first army of the other races definitely wouldn't have any ideas about this place. When the news reached Harden Barter and Daichin's ears, they couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. King Harden Barter's face finally showed a trace of relief as he said, "They really took a detour. Haha, let the other people have a headache from now on." "Yes, Your Majesty. Now that we've prepared ahead of time, we've stored large amounts of food in Kalabali city. It won't be a problem for us to defend for 2 to 3 years. By then the battle will have ended. At that time, with your 150,000 troops, you might become the strongest force here." Daichin also let out a sigh of relief. As the general, the pressure on him was greater than anyone else. Luckily the result was good. The 5-star army really did take a detour. Naturally, the burden on his body was also reduced by a bit. "You're saying that we still have a chance?" Harden Barter, who originally thought that they were just hiding for a while, suddenly thought of a possibility. If the result was as Daichin predicted, when the 5-star army and his allies were almost done fighting, wouldn't he be able to reap the greatest benefits by leading his 150,000 troops? Thinking about how the Turpan kingdom could use this opportunity to increase their strength and truly unify this place, Harden Barter couldn't help but laugh out loud. Wasn't this what he had been searching for? Perhaps it would truly be realized in his own hands. The new army went around Kalabali city and came to the hinterland of the Turpan kingdom. Then they attacked the city and took over the stronghold. No one could stop them. Some of the smaller cities had already opened their gates. The civilians had all run away. The Turpan army in the city had also all run away. It didn't take much effort at all. Chapter 1283. Regarding this, Commander Suhi was extremely clear-headed. Even though he was facing an empty city, he still sent people to investigate and only moved in after confirming that it was safe. After a night of rest, he did not leave a single soldier in the city the next morning. Instead, he continued to lead the army forward. He remembered Yang Qindong's order, which was to destroy the enemy's strength and not to snatch control of the city. Along the way, the advance of the 1st Cavalry had been incredibly fast. Along the way they had encountered some resistance from the Turfan army, but most of them were only a few hundred to 1,000 men. In front of the powerful 1st Cavalry, which numbered over 30,000, a single regiment could easily crush them in a single charge, wiping them out in just a few rounds. The new army progressed at an extremely fast pace, and good news was reported through the radio from time to time. In comparison, the progress of the new 5 armies could be said to be extremely fast. This was because they had originally chosen the east route. After setting off from Turpan, they also went around Chali and headed straight for Lop Nur. After taking down the nearby Ruoqiang County, their journey was extremely smooth. After some rest, they headed straight for Yirqiang's tribe. Next, it was time for them to show off their strength. In comparison, the 1st Army of the Outsiders was not so lucky. Under the lead of Commander Bai Shuang, they headed straight for Heavenly Mountain. Once they crossed the mountain, it would be equivalent to entering the hinterland of Ili and fighting with them. Luckily, they were prepared beforehand and had already scouted out their route. They found a relatively flat land, so crossing Heavenly Mountain was only a matter of time. Seeing that they were about to succeed and were about to face the city, Bai Shuang stopped the army and summoned the 4 division commanders to his tent. Inside the tent, Bai Shuang was wearing a purple cape. His young and handsome face had a maturity and steadiness that did not belong to his age. His clear eyes were staring at the sand table gathered by the intelligence department in front of him, thinking about something. "Commander." Tu Hai and the other division commanders walked into the tent. After seeing Bai Shuang, they could not help but call out, Bai Shuang had replaced Su Kuda as the commander of the First Army of the Outsiders. For a regiment commander to be promoted to the position of commander, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was being promoted beyond his rank. But who asked his teacher to be Yang Qindong and Bugnam of Gojoseon? Even though Tu Hai and the others did not agree in their hearts, they still had to put on a very respectful appearance on the surface. Bai Shuang could more or less guess the thoughts of the four teachers. However, he didn't mind because he believed that he could conquer them with his own abilities. This was also the idea that his teacher Yang Qindong had given him. During the new year, when Bai Shuang went to visit Yang Qindong, she had received some pointers. Seniority in the army was naturally not something that could be ignored, but ability was more important. According to what Yang Qindong had said, as long as he displayed enough strength, Tu Hai and the others would not listen to him. Of course, if they really dared to disobey military orders, they could deal with them according to military rules. On this point, Yang Qindong had fully delegated the authority to Bai Shuang. With Yang Qindong's support behind him, what did Bai Shuang have to fear? He immediately promised that he would use practical actions to prove himself, and at the same time he would not lose face for his teacher. Next, it was time to fight the first battle. How to make the four teachers truly submit to him? This battle was naturally very crucial. You've all come. Very good, take a look at the sand table in front of you. In half a day we will be able to cross the heavenly mountain. Next we will be entering the territory of Yili. The first town in front of us is the city department of Little Yule. The intelligence personnel have already sent news that there are 2,000 enemy soldiers here. Everyone tell us, how should we attack and occupy that place? As Bai Shuang spoke, his gaze landed on Tu Hai and the other three. Only 2,000 enemy soldiers. The four teachers couldn't help but reveal a proud expression. Clearly this amount of soldiers was nothing in their eyes. Especially the leader of the 301st Division, Tu Hai. As a veteran of countless battles, Tu Hai had already killed countless enemies. Only 2,000 people were nothing in his eyes. Therefore he was the first to speak. Military leader, it's only 2,000 enemies. Leave this matter to our division. I guarantee that we will be able to take it down within 2 hours. Tu Hai's words were extremely confident. In reality he also had the strength to do so. The other teachers originally wanted to ask for a battle, but since Tu Hai had already stood out, it was naturally not good for them to snatch the credit. But even though they did not say anything from their expressions, it was obvious that they were disdainful of this battle. 2 hours? Not bad, it is indeed very fast. After Bai Shuang heard Tu Hai's words, he nodded in approval. He. Hearing that Bai Shuang seemed to agree, Tu Hai laughed and immediately saluted. Military leader, I will go and make preparations. At this time tomorrow, I will guarantee that the army will be able to spend the night in Little Yule City Sea. After speaking, Tu Hai was about to turn and leave the tent, but Bai Shuang's voice rang out, Teacher Tu, please wait. Tu Hai, who was stopped, revealed a displeased expression. However, before he could say anything, Bai Shuang and the others also asked, Division Master Tu, how many men are you going to bring to attack? Can you guarantee that the other party will all stay in the city? Can you guarantee that none of the civilians or soldiers will escape? Can you guarantee that the news of our army appearing here will not be leaked? Can you guarantee that the stored food in the city will be safe for our army to use? Can you guarantee that? A series of questions were thrown out. In this short period of time, Tu Hai's expression changed again and again. He really wanted to say that once the battle started, who knew what would happen? How could he guarantee this? Who could guarantee this? After a series of questions were thrown out, Tu Hai did not know how to answer. However, Bai Shuang did not intend to stop asking. Instead, he continued to ask, I wonder if Teacher Tu can give an answer to these questions? This I can't guarantee. Tu Hai opened his mouth and closed it. After closing it and opening it again, he finally said these words. Okay, then which of the other teachers can do it? Bai Shuang then looked at Luan Xiaojiang and the others with a serious expression. No. Luan Xiaojiang, Sensei Naganabu and Kong Biao all shook their heads one by one. It was easy to take down a city, but it was too difficult to not leak any news. At this moment, Tu Hai had already recovered from his previous question. At this moment he finally said, Military leader, this is a bit too much. The situation of a battle is constantly changing. There is a saying in the art of war, there is no constant situation in war, and there is no constant situation in water. Who can guarantee that there will not be any problems? Wrong? Without waiting for Tu Hai to finish, Bai Shuang's stern gaze had already turned over. Changes in war do exist, but as long as the plan is good, it is very possible to control it within a certain range. Also, if you can't do it, it doesn't mean that others can't. I am willing to make a military pledge. I will personally go and control Little Yule City head. I guarantee that there will not be any problems. However, if there are any accidents, I am willing to resign from my current position and return to being a regiment commander. When the military pledge was made, the 4 teachers were so shocked that their jaws dropped. For a moment, they were all stunned and did not know what to say. Logically speaking, with Bai Shuang's current status, he could let his subordinates do things for him. Unless it was a matter of life and death for the First Army, he would not personally take action. This was also Yang Qindong's intention. High-ranking officers could not take risks because if something happened, the losses would be too great. However, Bai Shuang actually took the initiative to volunteer. However, to be able to become a teacher, none of them were idiots. They quickly thought it through. This time Bai Shuang was forcing himself. He was establishing his authority. Military commander, you can't. After thinking it through, E Division 303's Division Commander Sensei Naganabu took the initiative to stand up, wanting to say something. He was different from other people. Although he led the First Army, it was an army made up of people from different races, different regions, and even different faiths. However, to be able to become a high-ranking officer, other than him, everyone else was Han. This made his status somewhat awkward. When he did some things, he naturally could not be as unscrupulous as other people. Now that Bai Shuang was about to take the risk, of course he had to speak up to stop him and express his attitude. Sensei Naganabu was the first to speak up. Afterwards, E Division 302's Division Commander Luan Xiaojiang and E Division 304's Division Commander Kang Biao also spoke up to dissuade him. Whether they were sincere or just on the surface, at least they all knew that Bai Shuang's appointment as a military commander was personally ordered by Yang Qindong. That was set in stone and no one could stop him. And if something happened to Bai Shuang in front of them, as the commanders who held the military power, they would not be any better off. Out of the 4 commanders, 3 of them had expressed their opinions. Only Tu Hai stood there without saying anything. Instead, he looked at Bai Shuang up and down as if he had just met him. Alright, this military commander has made up his mind. It cannot be changed. How about this? I will bring the direct military guards to Little Yule City head. You all just need to stay at home and wait for the good news. Bai Shuang did not care if others looked at him or not. As the saying went, doing things beautifully was more convincing than saying more. Orders, everyone is to rest where they are. The direct military guards will follow me. Bai Shuang gave the order as a military commander. At this moment, even if the 4 commanders wanted to say something, it was all too late. In the 5-star army, the military commander's authority was still very great. Unless it involved a rebellion, the officers under him had to obey him unconditionally. Otherwise they would be punished according to military law. Bai Shuang left. He left very decisively, and indeed only brought the 2,000 soldiers of the direct military guards with him. However, others did not know that he did not intend to use all of the 2,000 soldiers. He only needed to bring a battalion into the city. The other 4 battalions were only responsible for keeping watch outside just in case. Chapter 1284. In the mountains 4 li away from Little Yule City, Bai Shuang was leading the 1st Guard Battalion to change. He took out a large amount of commoner clothing from the military luggage and put it on. As he fastened the buttons on his robe, Bai Shuang said to the large man standing beside him, "Commander Zhuang, I'll leave everything outside to you. If nothing goes wrong, I'll send you a signal at night. When the time comes, you must act quickly. Commander Zhuang's full name was Zhuang Cheng. He was originally a deputy battalion commander of the 4th Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. This time Bai Shuang came to the First Army. As a trusted aide, his status naturally rose, and he was promoted to Guard Battalion Commander. Zhuang Cheng's face was solemn, and his eyes were filled with concern. Hearing this, he immediately stood at attention. "Commander, I'll remember." "Very good, Battalion Commander Xiao, let's go." Bai Shuang had just finished changing his clothes. He glanced at the dozens of men behind him who had also changed their clothes. With a chuckle, he walked towards the nearby official road and headed towards the direction of Little Yule City. Battalion Commander Xiao Qing was originally a company commander of the 4th Regiment. He usually admired Bai Shuang's ability. This time he took the initiative to come along, and obtained the position of Guard Battalion Commander. Bai Shuang and the dozens of men walked on the official road. Little Yule City was already in sight. Bai Shuang couldn't help but slow down and said in a very casual tone, "The enemy has 2,000 soldiers in the city. Are you afraid?" "No." The soldiers all said in unison. To be able to go on a mission with their commander was their honor. If word got out, it would be something to gain face. Furthermore, the other brothers of the 1st Battalion had already changed into the city. They were the last batch. This way they had a total of 400 people. Although they didn't have as many soldiers as the enemy, they still had the ability to fight back. Not to mention, if their commander could lead the troops, he definitely had a thorough plan. What was there to be afraid of? Good, that's how war is. Very satisfied with the soldiers' answers, Bai Shuang said confidently, "On the battlefield, just because you're afraid of death, you won't be killed. On the contrary, if you weren't afraid of death, others would only be afraid of you. That way you would have more chances to protect yourself. Alright, you are all courageous and insightful people. Next, I will tell you about the next mission. As long as you are courageous and careful, the mission will not be difficult to complete." Back then, White Shuang had infiltrated and taken down Hoboksari city without shedding a drop of blood. For that, he had been praised by Yang Qindong. This time he had the same idea. The only difference was that he had changed his approach. This time he was not going to hold anyone hostage. Instead, he was going to give them gifts. This could be seen from the wooden boxes carried by the burly men behind him. Little Yule City. Although it was considered a border city of Ely because it was separated by a heavenly mountain, it was a little remote and not very lively. If it weren't for the chaos of war, where many commoners couldn't even fill their stomachs and were running around, the floating population here would be pitifully small. However, it was precisely because of this chaos that the other soldiers, disguised as refugees, did not encounter any trouble from the city guards when they entered the city. On the other hand, Bai Shuang and his group of several dozen people, dressed in bright clothes and full of vigor, quickly attracted the attention of the city guards. "Who are you people? All of you stop for inspection." The centurion in charge of guarding the city gate had a vigilant look on his face. After all, Bai Shuang's group was too conspicuous. Especially when there was a group of refugees in ragged clothes walking by, it highlighted their different identities. With this shout, Bai Shuang took the lead and stood on the spot. Then he chuckled and said, "Brother, don't be nervous. We are here to find your general and give him a gift." After saying this, Bai Shuang intentionally turned around to look at the 2 large wooden boxes behind him with a smile on his face. Bai Shuang was a person with delicate features. When he took the initiative to express his goodwill, he could indeed give people a good impression. In addition, there were only 30 brothers behind him. This centurion had 100 people beside him. Of course, he wouldn't take it too seriously. Give him a gift? The centurion was puzzled. It wasn't that he had never seen people giving gifts before, but it was his first time seeing someone giving gifts with such fanfare. Just as he was puzzled, Bai Shuang had already walked in front of him. Then he handed 2 silver ingots worth 10 silver taels each to the centurion. "That's right, we are here to give you a gift. I'll have to trouble you to inform the general that he will definitely reward you handsomely." 20 silver taels was not a small sum for a centurion who wasn't rich. His eyes immediately lit up. He used his hand to measure the quality of the silver. It was definitely of high quality. He immediately withdrew his ferocious expression and changed it into a smile. "Alright, since that's the case, follow me. I will bring you to see the general." It was obvious that this centurion still remembered Bai Shuang's words. The general would definitely reward him handsomely. Such a good job couldn't be given to someone else. With this centurion leading the way, it was naturally not difficult to enter the city. Not only that, they quickly arrived at the general's residence. When Bai Shuang saw that most of the houses in the city were dilapidated, but the residence in front of him was majestic and dignified, how could he not know that they had arrived? As expected, the centurion stopped in his tracks and pointed at the courtyard in front of him. "This is the residence of our general, Slam. Please." "Thank you, please." Bai Shuang immediately smiled and nodded. He had a look of gratitude as he followed the centurion into the residence. The difference was that Xiao Qing and the others behind him were blocked outside the door. They were watched over by the centurion's soldiers. Could be said that they were being held captive. Bai Shuang didn't show the slightest bit of fear because his subordinates were blocked. On the contrary, he entered with a calm expression. His gaze casually swept around as if he was very interested in everything in the courtyard. However, he knew that he was scouting the enemy. The centurion led the way. He seemed to be very familiar with everything in the residence. Along the way, he didn't let anyone lead him. Even at this time, There wasn't even a housekeeper coming out to welcome him. All of this entered Bai Shuang's eyes and made him feel disdain. From this, it could be seen that the general's standards were too ordinary. The reality was as Bai Shuang expected. Under the centurion's guidance, Bai Shuang easily saw the person in charge, Slam. He was a man with a rather tall and sturdy figure, but his face was a bit pale. Based on his experience in observing people, Bai Shuang could easily tell that this Slam was someone who had been hollowed out by wine and women. This was very consistent with the information sent by the intelligence department. Although Bai Shuang appeared to be very confident along the way, if it wasn't for the fact that he continuously obtained a lot of information about General Ibali from the intelligence department while the land was covered in snow, how could he enter so fearlessly? It was only when the preparation work was done that he appeared to be so confident in doing things. According to the information provided by the intelligence department, this Slam was someone who was ostracized by the upper echelons of General Ibali, which was why he was arranged to guard such a remote small city. Bai Shuang was very confident that she could establish a relationship with these people who were depressed and unable to achieve their goals. Slam looked as if he had just woken up from a drunken stupor. When he saw that it was a centurion under his command, he yawned and pointed at Bai Shuang, who was standing there, and said, "Who is he? What is he doing here?" With the opportunity to speak, the centurion thought of the reward. He immediately leaned over with a face full of joy. He came to Slam's side and whispered for a while. Originally, Slam didn't seem to care. He thought that it was another homeless person who wanted to join the army. However, in just a short while, his eyes became brighter and brighter. In the end, before the centurion finished speaking, he had already grabbed his arm and asked with a face full of joy, "You're saying that there are 2 big chests and that there might be silver inside?" The centurion only felt a burst of pain when Slam grabbed his arm, but he had no choice but to nod and answer, "Yes, General. I haven't seen what's inside the chests, but I think it's silver without a doubt." Good, then why aren't you bringing it up?" As Slam, who was sent to a remote place, even if he wanted to deduct some silver and receive some benefits, he had nowhere to go. Recently there were more and more refugees. For a time there were all kinds of people. There were even many bandits passing by. As a result, the security of Little Yule City wasn't very good. Every day there were all kinds of bad news and he was already sick of it. Now that he heard that someone was actually giving him silver, how could he not be happy? In his excitement he couldn't help but forget himself. The centurion also wanted to see if the chests were filled with silver, but Bai Shuang was still standing there and didn't speak. He looked down on the general's ugly expression and could only remind him softly, "General, the person is here. Shouldn't we first ask him why he's here?" "Him?" Yes, he had to ask first. That who's the person below? With this reminder, Slama finally reacted. Then he tidied up his clothes and asked in a very serious manner. Finally it was his turn. Bai Shuang had already prepared his speech. "General, my surname is Bai and I'm in the grain business. You also know that in the chaos of war the price of grain is rising again and again. Therefore I gave up all my wealth and opened a trade route from the grasslands. As long as the general agrees, we can continuously transport grain from the north of Tianshan Mountain. At that time we will have to pass through the general's territory. Therefore this time I'm here to give the general a gift and hope that we can work together to achieve great things." "What? You're in the grain business? You can transport grain from the north of the mountain? You're Han?" At this moment, Slam's eyes were already wide open. He was completely shocked by Bai Shuang's words. Chapter 1285. If one were to talk about what was the most valuable right now, the first would be food. After all, people could buy less clothes and even a piece of clothing could be worn for a long time with some mending. However, they could not go without food for a day. Otherwise there would be problems and even death. Especially in this war, the price of food had increased exponentially. Even though Si Jianghu had already received orders to stock up on food, he still felt that the granary in the city was too small. After all, no one knew how long this war would last. There was only going out and not going in. It was truly worrying. And now, someone said that they could get a large amount of food. How could he not be alarmed? The first thing he did was to ask if the other party was Han. After all, only the Han-led 5-star army would not lack food. That was why they had such a way to transport food. Regarding his identity as Han, Bai Shuang had no intention of hiding it. He did not want to hide it either. Facing Si Jianghu's question, he did not have any intention of denying it. He immediately nodded. "General has good eyesight. This one is Han. With this admission, Jianghu's body tensed up. Their opponent, the five-star army, was mainly Han. However, Bai Shuang's next sentence caused Slamu's tense nerves to relax a lot. I'm a Han Chinese, but not all Han Chinese are part of the five-star army. Not all Han Chinese like to fight and are willing to fight. This one only likes to earn money. I do not understand military matters and do not want to understand. Hearing Bai Shuang say that he was not part of the five-star army and did not like to fight. He only liked to earn money, Jianghu's expression became much better. The centurion to the side was also shocked by Bai Shuang's identity as a Han. He was not afraid that the other party would do anything to him. After all, this was Little Yule City, his territory. He was worried that the reward he was about to receive would be gone. Now that he heard such words, his heart moved. He quickly said to Jianghu, "General, what he said makes sense. Not all Han people are our enemies. Besides, if he really is an enemy, why would he give you money? I'm afraid that he would have long come over with weapons." That makes sense. Living in a remote area, Sama didn't know much about the five-star army, so he didn't think the five-star army was that scary. The most important thing was that he also believed that this was Little Yule City, and this was his territory. There were only a few dozen people here, but he had 2,000 soldiers. If the other party dared to act rashly, he only needed to give an order to settle everything. Furthermore, he knew that if he were White Double, he definitely wouldn't have the guts to barge into the five-star army's barracks. Judging others by his own standards, Sama's vigilance dropped a lot. When he looked at White Shuang, he focused all his attention on the grain business. "What did you say your surname was?" "General," he said, "his surname is Bai," the centurion said with a flattering look. "Oh yes, Mr. Bai, right? You said that you can transport food, then may I ask where the food is?" Slamu resumed his high and mighty general appearance and asked Bai Shuang. He. Seeing the other party ask such an idiotic question, Bai Shuang couldn't help but laugh out loud. Then he felt that the situation wasn't right. Seeing Slamu's confused expression, he took the initiative to explain, "General, this time I'm only the vanguard. I'm in charge of clearing all the checkpoints. Also, we're not very sure if there's a need for food here. Only after understanding everything will the food be transported here in large quantities." With this explanation, Slamu's old face turned red. He also knew that he seemed to have asked a very stupid question. But right now his attention wasn't on this at all. He was thinking about large quantities of food. When White Shuang finished speaking, he immediately said, lack of food. I'll take as much as you have, but I don't know the price." The price is only 30% higher than the market price. White Shuang hesitated for a moment, then tentatively raised 3 fingers. 30%. Hearing this price, Slama seemed to have been pricked by something. With a whoosh, he bounced up from the chair. "What? 30% is a lot? That won't do. 20% is fine." White Shuang looked very careful, showing his worry and nervousness. No, it's not much. 30% is already very good." The laughing Slamu had already walked over from the chair and came to White Shuang's side. He was very clear that in Ely food was priceless. Anyone who had some skills and some strength would be hoarding food. They were afraid that if there was a war, there would be no food to eat. Who would be willing to sell food? Not to mention 30%, even if it was doubled or even tripled, they would still easily sell it. Thinking about it this way, this was definitely a big deal. White Shuang had undoubtedly become a noble person in his eyes. He immediately came to White Shuang's side with a face full of smiles. His eyes were filled with indescribable passion. Because he was too passionate, White Shuang couldn't help but take a step back. "General, don't lie to me. Is 30% really no problem?" White Shuang's eyes moved as he spoke, showing his shrewd side on his face. "Of course there's no problem. I'll take as much as you send." Ha! Slama laughed loudly. He originally thought that after being sent to this remote little city, it would be difficult for him to achieve anything in his life. He didn't think that a good thing would fall into his lap. How could he not grasp it? At this moment, White Shuang's heart finally settled. The business was more or less done. Next, White Shuang brought up the 2 boxes of silver he had prepared. At this moment, Slama was shocked to the point of choking. He had a new understanding of White Shuang's wealth and no longer doubted it. After all, if he didn't have a request, why would he give him so many benefits first? Regardless of whether there was food or not, just based on these 2 boxes of silver, it was not a loss to make this friend. The things that should be set up were done. Everything that followed was much easier. Bringing White Shuang and the others to the residence, a banquet was set up. Under White Shuang's request, All the officers with some authority in the city were invited to the residence. At the banquet that night, Slamu even put his arm around White Shuang's shoulder in front of everyone and introduced him as his brother. In the future, everyone should give him face and so on. When the other generals saw this situation, how could they not know what to do? One by one they took the initiative to come to White Shuang's side to toast him, wanting to get familiar with him. White Shuang's alcohol tolerance was not bad. He didn't refuse anyone and led his brothers to drink with everyone. This drinking lasted for nearly 4 hours. In the end, most of the generals in the courtyard had collapsed to the ground. White Shuang, who was also 40% drunk, shook his head. He didn't forget his mission. Looking at the battalion commander Xiao Qing who hadn't drunk, he said, "Go, this is Slamu's military seal. Take it and let your brothers into the city. Gather the other soldiers in the city and watch over them." "Yes," Xiao Qing said with a face full of excitement. At this moment he was completely convinced by the military chief. He had only used 2 chests of silver to take down the entire Little Yule city without shedding a drop of blood. Most importantly, he had completely sealed off the news of the army entering the city. This was a true wise man, a true expert. Xiao Qing left. Using the commander's seal, he quickly found Commander Zhuang Cheng, who was waiting for news outside the city. What happened next was much simpler. The 5-star division quietly entered the city. Following that, they gathered all the guards inside. After that, they removed their weapons and became prisoners of war. All of this was completed before daybreak. Then the signal was sent out. An extremely bright flash grenade soared into the sky. 3 li away, 2 high, and the others who were waiting for news immediately brought over 30,000 soldiers towards Little Yule city. The sky finally brightened. Slamu, who was in a daze, was awoken by the urge to urinate. When he slowly opened his eyes, he didn't have the urge to urinate anymore. This was because at this moment, a steel blade was placed on his neck. Surrounding him was a group of 5-star army soldiers wearing military green uniforms. This is a dream. This must be a dream. Slamu hurriedly closed his eyes. Then he opened them again. However, nothing had changed. There was only a fierce gaze in Commander Xiao Qing's eyes. "General C, you're finally awake? Then let's have a good talk now." Talk about what?" Slamu's voice was trembling as he spoke. Even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't have thought that the 5-star army would appear in front of him. Even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't have thought that the enemy would leap over the mountains. Because perhaps people and horses could leap over, but what about the army's rations? How could he know that White Shuang didn't bring any rations over? He only had the soldiers carry rations for 5 days. This was because he believed that as long as they came here, there would naturally be people who would give them rations. White Shuang, who had already grasped the situation, suddenly had a fierce look in his eyes. He knew that he should show Slamu some power. Otherwise, he was afraid that this person wouldn't cooperate with him. Now that he had occupied the capital of Little Yule, there were 2 ways to enter the deeper regions of Ili Belly. The first was to head south to the capital of Big Yule. From there he would enter the Tex River, and then to the north would be the Katimian Mountains, which would be to the south of the capital of Ili Belly. The other was to head north, through the 3 cities of Nalatu, Telhala, and Kangisi, and across the Kangisi River, he would reach the capital of Ili Belly. Comparatively speaking, the latter path was more difficult to advance. However, the strength of the enemy would also be heavier. This was more in line with Yang Qindong's military plans. However, he didn't make the final choice. Everything would depend on the result of his discussion with Slamu. He believed that this person would definitely bring him a pleasant surprise. Chapter 1286. Facing Bai Shuang's murderous gaze, Slamu's heart trembled. He had thought of something and his thoughts came true. He heard Bai Shuang say coldly, "I can tell you now that I'm not a merchant. We're the 5-star army. We've crossed Tianshan Mountain to come here. This time we're here to take your king's dog life. Trust me, it won't be long before this place becomes the territory of our 5-star army. All the soldiers here who oppose us will be killed or become captives who will never see the light of day. You're very lucky to be caught by us first. Now you're still useful. As long as you're willing to cooperate with us, I promise you'll live a good life. Of course, you can choose not to cooperate. However, I know you, but the blade in my hand doesn't. Please make your choice." As he spoke, he intentionally waved the blade in his hand. The sharp blade flashed in front of Slamu, scaring him out of his wits. Speaking of which, no one wasn't afraid of death. Especially Slamu, who was used to being a general. He could treat other people's lives like grass, but he couldn't do that to himself. In addition, he had been marginalized for many years. He had a lot of complaints against the upper echelons, so he wasn't loyal at all. Now, in order to survive, he didn't have any psychological pressure. He already had the thought of surrendering, but he still wanted to fight for more benefits. After Slamu's eyes looked around, he looked at Bai Shuang, who was waiting for an answer, and said, "How can I believe you? How can the glory and wealth you speak of be fulfilled?" Even at this time, Slamu was still thinking about how to obtain more benefits for himself. In the eyes of these people, there was no such thing as a nation, a country, or dignity. They only cared about their own benefits. If these people were in the 5-star army, needless to say, once they were discovered, they wouldn't be put in an important position. They might even be kicked out of the army at any time and sent to be punished. Bai Shuang looked down on these people. His tone wasn't polite. "Slamu, you're now our prisoner. Do you think you still have the right to talk about conditions? You can only choose to believe us now. Otherwise, we'll cut you in half right now and hang you on the city wall to let you have a taste of the wind and rain." "No, I'll cooperate with you. I'll completely cooperate with you. I just hope you keep your promise." When Slamu heard these ruthless words and saw Bai Shuang's unfriendly gaze, he immediately replied with a face full of fear. Bai Shuang was very satisfied with just a scare, and Slamu was convinced. In order to make the other party cooperate with him better, White Shuang also intentionally retracted his killing intent, and a smile appeared on his face. "That's the way, right? Don't worry, our 5-star army are very friendly to our friends. You can also go and scare them a little. As long as our 5-star army occupies a place, most of the local generals will be responsible for the security work. If your performance is satisfactory, not only will you receive a large amount of rewards, you might even have the chance to become the general of this area in the future." Good. Hearing that if he did his job well, he would even have a higher position, Slamu's eyes revealed a look of yearning. He immediately nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Very quickly, he told White Double Ears everything he knew, including the military arrangements of the nearby cities and the situation of the military forces. Tu Hai and the other 3 division commanders were already waiting in the hall. When Bai Shuang brought Slamu in front of them, the attitude of the 4 was clearly much more respectful than before. They had already heard about what had happened. Bai Shuang was the commander of an army, and his status was extremely noble. However, he had still entered the tiger's den, daring to bring a few dozen people into Little Yule City. Then, without harming a single brother, he had taken control of the situation here. Just based on this, it wasn't something the 4 division commanders could do. They might be able to take down Little Yule City with a small price, but they definitely couldn't do it as quietly as Bai Shuang. The most important thing was that the news of them appearing here wasn't leaked. This gave them more time to prepare and choose, creating better conditions for the next attack. After Bai Shuang entered the hall, he noticed the attitude of the 4 division commanders. They were clearly more respectful. This made him very satisfied. He didn't expect these people to immediately submit to him, but as long as they didn't hinder him, he believed that his performance in the future would make them truly submit. "You're all here. Let me introduce you. This is General Slamu. He is now our friend and is willing to provide us with everything we need to know. He is also willing to cooperate with us. Now, let's ask him to explain the surrounding situation." Bai Shuang smiled and nodded at Slamu. He had already heard it once. Now that he had Slamu explain it again, it wasn't that Bai Shuang's memory was bad. On the contrary, he was very smart. The reason why he did this, other than letting the 4 division commanders understand the situation, he also wanted to test Slamu again and see if he introduced the same thing twice. Once he found a problem, he would properly explain it. Fortunately, Slamu really surrendered at this moment, so what he said was naturally true. 2 introductions, the language might be reversed, but the meaning didn't change. Bai Shuang finally relaxed. He looked at the 4 division commanders and said, "Now that everyone understands the situation, let's talk about what you all think." The East Army's new 5th Army. After speeding up their march all the way to Lopner River, they went straight to Lop City in the southwest direction. Under the lead of Shi Wanshan, they advanced at a speed of a few hundred li per day. What they wanted was to take the enemy by surprise. They wanted to directly attack the enemy. According to Yang Qindong's request, they moved unhindered in the Yarqiang Kingdom, so that they didn't have time and energy to deal with the Turpan Kingdom. The 5-star army's main force would be able to take over the Turpan Kingdom. The new army also bypassed Khaleesi City and came to the Iron Gate Pass behind it, cutting off the retreat of the Turpan Kingdom's army, making it a completely isolated city. It also forced Hardenbarter to send reinforcements. The strategy of encircling and attacking reinforcements has been formed. In the Turpan Kingdom, when all kinds of information were gathered through the radio, Yang Qindong was naturally very satisfied after reading it. It can be said that the performance of the three armies was better than he expected. They didn't care about the gains and losses of a city and only wanted to destroy the enemy's strength. This kind of strategic thinking was very advanced. He believed that when the enemy reacted, it would be too late for them to regret it. For now, let these three monkeys continue to cause trouble. When the time is right, it will be time for him to lead the army to battle. At this time, Yang Qindong's mood was very good. Beta Persei noticed this and hurriedly came over. Young master, you also have to take care of your body. Don't always be like this. If you have work, you can give it to others. Knowing that Beta Persei was concerned about him, Yang Qindong had a smile on his face. How could he not want to rest? But anyone who wanted to achieve such a big goal in a short period of time would have no time to rest. How is Division Commander Tian and Division Commander Ling doing? The two people he was talking about were the Division Commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tianhu, and the Division Commander of the 4th Division, Ling Daqiang. After the liberation, they received the order to liberate the Fire Province, Willow City, and other places around Turpan. As the capital of Turpan, there were many large cities and strategic towns around Turpan. It was just that because of the geographical location, they couldn't provide much protection. When Hardenbarter escaped, he didn't escape to those places, causing them to become isolated cities. For the safety of the rear, Yang Qindong decided to liberate these cities. Only then could he walk out of Turpan without any worries. When it came to the situation of these cities, Beta Persei's face immediately showed an excited expression. Young master, everything is going well. The Fire Province has been taken. So fast? Hearing that the Fire Province had been captured, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with surprise. Tell me the details. Yes. We first sent people to the Fire Province to persuade them to surrender, but the effect was not good. Although they didn't kill people because of the strength of our 5-star army, they threw the emissary out of the city, which angered the 2 division commanders. They divided the work, and the 4th Division blasted open the west gate of the Fire Province city with a few cannons. Then Division Commander Tian, who led the brave cavalry into the city. What followed was naturally a one-sided situation. The Fire Province city was broken in less than half a day. Most of the 20,000 Turpan soldiers guarding the city surrendered and a few were killed. Now, the 2 division commanders are using the same method to go to Yanghai City. The news just came and it seems that the problem can be solved peacefully. When talking about this, Beta Persei's face was full of joy. Clearly this person was a warmonger in his bones. Yang Qindong was also very satisfied after hearing this. Yes, that's right. If we don't attack, then it's fine. If we move, then it's like a bolt of lightning. Don't give them a chance to fight back. Of course, if we can solve the problem without using a single soldier, then that's naturally the best. Yes, I'll immediately send someone to pass on the young master's order. Beta Persei knew that Yang Qindong was a person who loved his soldiers like his children. This was also because he didn't want to make too many sacrifices, so he immediately nodded. Then, seeing that Yang Qindong was indeed in a good mood, he tried to suggest, "Young master, today's official business is not so busy. Why don't we take a walk on the street? You don't know, but Turpan City is very lively right now." Chapter 1287. Yang Qindong was right about this. Ever since this place was occupied by the 5-star army, especially after the previous siege of Turpan, the hearts of the people here had all fallen to the 5-star army's side. In addition, this was a big city in the front line of the battle, so it naturally became the first choice of the fleeing people of the 3 kingdoms. They had already made sufficient preparations, and there was enough food in the city. There were nearly 100 big and small grain stores, which greatly solved the problem of food for the people. More and more people stayed here, so it was naturally very lively. Yang Qindong sat in the palace every day. Even if he did not step out of the palace, he could still understand a lot of things through the radio. This made it difficult for him to have any leisure time. Now that the military affairs were going smoothly, he could take a walk on the streets to understand the actual situation. If he discovered some practical problems, he would not have to work and rest. After thinking about it, he did not leave the palace for a long time, so he nodded. Okay, then go and make the arrangements. Remember, don't bring too many guards. Don't disturb the security of the city. Since he said not to bring too many guards, Beta Persei did not dare to be negligent. As the core of Yangxie and the soul of the 5-star army, his safety had always been the most important. After Beta Persei got Yang Qindong's approval, he quickly went out and called the Longwei's first captain, Qiu Vi, over. Then a team of 50 Longwei elites changed into casual clothes and prepared. This was only what could be seen. There were still 200 Longwei members who would follow outside. Once they found any problems, they would immediately appear and provide support. Yang Qindong also changed into a green robe and led Beta Persei, Qiu Vi and the others out of the palace to the streets. At this time, Turpan City was indeed as Beta Persei had said. The streets were crowded with people and it was a lively scene. On both sides of the road, there were countless shops of all kinds. Everything related to food, clothing, housing and transportation was not lacking. These were all operated by the people of other races who had migrated here. Their arrival made the city even more lively and prosperous, filled with people. Occasionally, people in ragged clothes could be seen on the streets. They were all people who had fled from Turpan, Yarqiang and Ili. Every time they saw them they could see the surprise and caution in their eyes. They were surprised by the prosperity of Turpan City, and careful that their identity and clothes seemed to be somewhat out of place here. As the group walked, Beta Persei introduced what he had learned to Yang Qindong. Young master, these people will generally be observed for 2 days after entering the city. First, let them feel the prosperity of our Yangxie land. This will make them more confident in their future life and make them more prepared to integrate here in the future. Second, it will also make it easier for our soldiers to observe them. If there are spies from the 3 kingdoms among them, they will often give themselves away and it will be easier for us to screen them. Of course, after 2 days, those who have no problems will be invited to the shelter in the city to register. Then they will be transported to the beginning city by the vehicles transporting supplies. There, they will report to the logistics headquarters of Yangxi for resettlement and distribution. Yang Qindong listened silently and nodded from time to time. He doesn't pay too much attention to these things now. With Yangxie on the right track, he only needs to make decisions on some important matters. These matters will naturally be handled by specialized personnel. Sometimes when they report the results he may not even check them. Not bad, this is a good way to deal with it. The governor of the Far Eastern state, Qin Bo, sent a telegram a while ago, saying that there is a large amount of newly opened land that no one is planting. Moreover, the land there is very fertile. It is really too wasteful. Now that we need manpower, we can consider letting Yangxi send more people over. Listening to Yang Qindong's instructions, Beta Persei of course agreed and kept it in mind. At this time he was not only the captain of Yang Qindong's guards, but also the butler, secretary, assistant and other positions. It can be said that he has a high position and power, but he is also very busy. While they were talking, the road in front suddenly became very crowded. Looking from a distance they could see that many people were gathered there, and it seemed that there were a lot of people. On the periphery, many 5th-star army soldiers in military green uniforms were maintaining law and order. What's going on? With so many people crowded here, Yang Qindong asked with a slight frown. Go and ask around. Beta Persei didn't often go out of the palace, so he naturally didn't know. He ordered Qiu Vi beside him. Very quickly, the 2 quick-witted dragon guards rushed forward and returned after a short while. Because they were on the street, they didn't salute Yang Qindong. Instead, they cupped their hands and said, "Sixth young master, the female soldiers in the propaganda office are setting up a stage to perform a show. There are many people watching nearby." The propaganda office. Hearing this, Yang Qindong was also interested. He laughed and said with great interest, "Then let's go and take a look." "Okay, I'll arrange it." Beta Persei quickly agreed. Of course, he wouldn't let the young master and the people crowded together to watch the show. If that happened, safety would be a big problem. Immediately, he sent out a few people to look for a spot nearby. He had heard that as long as there was a performance, there would be good observation points in the nearby restaurants. Usually, these places would be occupied by the soldiers of the 5-star army in advance to prevent people from causing trouble and causing problems in terms of safety. Not long after the Longwei left, they came back to report that they had found the 3rd floor of a restaurant. The location was excellent and the view was excellent. The 5th-star army soldiers who were responsible for observing there had already withdrawn. They were only waiting for Yang Qindong to go. "Let's go." Yang Qindong also knew that with his current status, it was really not suitable for him to mingle with the people. At least, it was not possible in Turpan City, where the situation was not completely stable. So he nodded and let the long way lead him to a nearby restaurant. The third floor was high and looked down from above. It was the big stage of the propaganda office. From here he could overlook everything. There were originally a few tables on the third floor, but they were completely empty at this moment. The table with the best view had a fruit plate placed on it. Yang Qindong naturally sat at the head of the table. He looked around and saw that the soldiers of the propaganda office were performing. There were many female soldiers among them, and all of them were young and beautiful. Their presence made the show even more attractive. Not long after Yang Qindong sat down, footsteps came from the stairs of the third floor, followed by soft greetings. Yang Qindong's ears were extraordinary, so he naturally heard it clearly. Everyone was calling the 8th vice-captain. Needless to say, it must be Ba Daojiang, the vice-captain of the Longwei 1st Brigade. It was Ba Daojiang. He was off duty today. He had just heard that Yang Qindong came out of the palace and came to the street, so he quickly rushed over. As soon as he entered the third floor and saw Yang Qindong sitting there, he immediately gave a standard military salute. Okay, you're not wearing your military uniform, so there's no need to salute. Yang Qindong looked at Ba Daojiang with a satisfied gaze and nodded gently. Although Ba Daojiang was not the first person to follow Yang Qindong, he was an old man who had been here before the origin city was built. He had always been good and was responsible for Yang Qindong's safety. He had never neglected his duties. Yang Qindong's attitude toward such a person was naturally much more casual. Yang Qindong's tone was so casual. When Captain Xiuvi heard it, he chuckled and then took the opportunity to tease him. What's wrong, Vice Captain? You're here to escort the publicity department when you're on vacation. This is almost your second home. Is something good going to happen soon? The burly Ba Daojiang suddenly blushed at this time, which was rare for him. He threw a look at Xiuvi, telling him to shut up. Although Ba Daojiang was the vice-captain, he had a very good relationship with Captain Xiuvi. The two of them had gone through countless dangers and life-and-death situations together. Their relationship was not any worse than that of brothers. It was precisely because of this that some of his words could be said to be heard clearly by Xiuvi. That was why he could make fun of him. Hearing this, Beta Persei and the Longwei could not help but laugh. Only Yang Qindong looked confused. What are you talking about? When Yang Qindong asked, the people below naturally did not dare to not answer. Beta Persei then whispered in front of him, Young master, the situation is like this. Ba Daojiang has fallen in love with the publicity department's director, Shui Qing. At this time he is stepping up his attack on the city. Yang Qindong, who heard the news, nodded as if he suddenly realized something. He was really too busy, so he naturally did not pay too much attention to the matters of the soldiers around him. However, Yang Qindong knew about Shui Qing. She was considered an old member of the publicity department and was also one of the subordinates that the 6th Madame Luan Xiaoyu valued. He had some impression of this person. After being exposed, Ba Daojiang's face turned even redder. At this moment, he lowered his head, losing his usual vigor. Seeing this, Yang Qindong laughed. Men should get married when they are of age. What's there to be embarrassed about? I just don't know how your progress is. Don't embarrass Longwei. Even Yang Qindong began to make fun of him. The Longwei could not help but laugh. Ba Daojiang, whose face was even redder, stretched his neck and said, 6th young master, Shui Qing has a good impression of me, but she said that she is too busy with work now, so she wants to wait a while before discussing the marriage. Obviously, Ba Daojiang was afraid that others would look down on him, so he directly admitted it. Then there's no problem. Not bad. Hearing this answer, Yang Qindong knew that this was a matter of mutual consent. He thought that since he had nothing to do, he might as well be the matchmaker for another month. He nodded slowly and said, We have always been very busy with work and will only get busier in the future. How can we have time to rest? How about this, you call Shui Qing over? I will ask her. If there is no problem with her, I will make the decision for your marriage. Chapter 1288. Yang Qindong knew that there would be a huge war coming up and there would be no time left. Ba Daojiang wasn't young anymore. He might as well take this opportunity to settle the matter. It would be a good thing to fulfill someone's wish. The 6th young master was going to be the witness. Ba Daojiang grinned from ear to ear. Xiuvi, who was standing at the side, saw that his deputy only knew how to smile and didn't do anything. He couldn't help but kick him. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and invite Miss Shui Qing over. I'll go right away. Ba Daojiang, who had regained his senses, immediately agreed. He then turned around and disappeared from the third floor. Seeing how anxious he was, the Longwei crowd burst into laughter. In less than an instant's time, Ba Daojiang dragged the panting Shui Qing to the third floor of the restaurant and stood in front of Yang Qindong. Shui Qing was originally organizing a performance downstairs. Previously, she was the publicity director of the Origin City region. Now, she was promoted to the publicity director of the entire grassland region. There were many things that she needed to do every day. When Ba Daojiang suddenly appeared by her side, she was both happy and surprised. When Ba Daojiang first appeared by her side and expressed his desire to pursue her, Shui Qing also fell in love with this honest man. Later on, because of work, the two of them spent more time apart than together. However, this didn't dilute their feelings for each other. Instead, it made them feel like they were newlyweds every time they met. Later on, when the two of them were talking about marriage, Ba Daojiang even said that he would find a chance to report this matter to the sixth young master and invite him to be the witness. Regarding this matter, Shui Qing only listened to it for a while. What kind of person was the sixth young master? How many things did he have to do every day? How would he have the time to deal with these small matters? Although Ba Daojiang was the vice-captain of the Black Cavalry 1st Platoon and could be considered one of Yang Qindong's men, she didn't have any illusions. She didn't expect that Ba Daojiang would suddenly appear just now. Shui Qing thought that he missed her again. Just when she was overjoyed, but because she was too busy with work, Ba Daojiang suddenly grabbed her hand. Then, the two of them ran out in front of all the people backstage of the publicity department. Although Shui Qing had long acknowledged her relationship with Ba Daojiang and thought that she was his woman for the rest of her life. However, the wedding banquet had not been held yet, and the two of them were still scrupulously abiding by their identities. They had never had any physical intimacy. Now that her hand was grabbed in front of everyone, she blushed. When she finally reacted, her expression became even better. At the same time, she blamed Ba Daojiang and asked him to let go of her hand and let her go. Alright, let's not worry about other things at this time. The sixth young master is waiting for us upstairs. Let's go. Ba Daojiang knew what Shui Qing was thinking. Women were always shy. However, he really didn't have time to wait. Who knew if there would be some urgent matter that would call the sixth young master back? If that was the case, he would miss a great opportunity. Just now, the platoon leader took the opportunity to tell the sixth young master about him. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Holding Shui Qing's hand, he jogged all the way to the third floor of the restaurant and stood in front of Yang Qindong. When she saw Yang Qindong with her own eyes, Shui Qing's heart, which was already racing from jogging all the way, started to beat even faster. The current Yang Qindong was like a god in the eyes of the Yangxie people in the 5-star army. Especially after the publicity department had been instructed to deliberately create a cult of personality, his reputation had spread at a rapid pace. As the most important middle-level cadre in the publicity department, Shui Qing naturally regarded Yang Qindong as a god. Now that she was able to get close to the god in her heart, Shui Qing was very excited. You must be Shui Qing. Not bad. He looked at Shui Qing and found that this girl had a great temperament. Especially when she was wearing the lieutenant colonel uniform, it made her look even more valiant and full of an indescribable heroic spirit. This girl was quite compatible with a burly man like Ba Daojiang. A single word of praise made Shui Qing's face blossom into a smile, like a lotus flower emerging from the water. Her face carried a brilliant yet somewhat bashful smile. Thank you for the king's praise. With Shui Qing's status, she could only call Yang Qindong king. She couldn't casually call him king. No problem, Director Shui Qing. You can call me sixth young master like Ba Daojiang. Yang Qindong smiled and said with a warm voice. In order to make Shui Qing feel less restrained, Yang Qindong smiled and asked about work. He knew that when interacting with people, he had to start with the areas that they were most familiar with. This way he could quickly eliminate the barriers between them. As expected, when it came to reporting work, Shui Qing became less shy and more shrewd and capable. Yes, sixth young master. Under the guidance of Logistics Commander Yang, our publicity department just carried out an expansion of recruitment. To be honest, there are many girls who are good at singing and dancing in the grasslands. We went through a serious selection process. After the political investigation department participated in the selection process, we recruited a total of 1,200 new members. Now they have been divided into 12 publicity teams and have begun to perform in various places. The performance team on the streets of Turpan City today is one of them. They are currently performing the defense of Turpan city not long ago. We used the Turpan brothers, Tumu, as the model and added some exaggerated techniques to create this performance. Listening to Shui Qing's report, Yang Qindong was also interested. He knew about Tumu. This person was a local of Turpan city. At first he wanted to earn money, so he joined the defense of Turpan city. Later on he fully displayed his ability to fight on the battlefield. Now he was already a company commander of 100 soldiers. Although his position wasn't very high, as a local of Turpan, he could be a representative and a model to promote. More often than not, the more grassroots people would resonate with them. It could be said that this was a very good example. Yes, I know about Tumu. You chose him as the model, so your train of thought is correct. Then tell me, how are the results? Yang Qindong wanted to know what kind of changes the performance of the publicity team could bring to the overall situation. After all, if the performance was only for the sake of completing the mission, but there were no results, then the performance would lose its true meaning. At this moment, Shui Qing's face revealed a confident expression. Sixth young master, the results are very good. With Tumu as the model, the recruitment office has already sent a notice. Now there are many people who have signed up. They are already too busy. Oh? Not bad, not bad. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with the results. To be able to recruit more soldiers from the local area was naturally something that he was happy to see. They were familiar with the local situation and had long adapted to the local climate. With them, the combat troops could take fewer detours. Listening to Yang Qindong's praise, Shui Qing's face was even sweeter than eating honey, and her small face was bright red. Seeing that Yang Qindong was in a good mood, Beta Persei also thought of some things he had heard before. He decided to put in more effort and put in some good words for Shui Qing. When he was pursuing Kikage, this director Shui Qing helped him a lot. He would not forget this favor. Young master, I heard that since the performance of the publicity team, the people have a better understanding of our army and some of our policies, so the voices and emotions against us have decreased a lot. There's such a thing? Listening to Beta Persei's further explanation, Yang Qindong laughed out loud. Very good, this is the change brought to people's lives and work by literature and art. Well, I hope the publicity department will continue to expand the performance team. I think 10 teams are a bit too few. I'll talk to Yang Si later, it should be expanded. 100 is not a lot. Since Yang Qindong said so, Shui Qing immediately agreed happily and kept nodding. She would not forget that when she wanted to expand the publicity department, she had to persuade Yang Si for a long time. If she did not have the backing of the 6th Madam, Luan Xiaoyu, she was afraid that the expansion of these 10 teams would not be supported. But now it was different. With Yang Qindong's endorsement, it would be much easier to go to the logistics headquarters to ask for people and money. Even the 6th young master was so supportive of their work and praised their work. Who would dare to neglect it? Who would not listen to the 6th young master's words? This meeting was a happy one for everyone. After all, Yang Qindong had too many things to do. He stayed in the restaurant for a while and watched the performance below. He saw that there were more and more people gathering around, and they all revealed looks of curiosity, especially some young people. No matter if they were men or women, they all revealed looks of yearning. Yang Qindong knew that the performance of the publicity team could continue to be carried out in order to win more people's hearts and gain more people's support. Speaking of publicity teams, it was very difficult for the people to see them in the past. Occasionally, some vaudeville troupes could perform on the streets. There was no Peking opera in that era. And where could they find so many handsome men and beautiful women in such troupes? Where could they find such good and diverse education and story themes? The publicity team was a pioneer. As soon as they appeared, they attracted everyone's attention. Regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, they liked them very much. It was precisely because they liked him that they were willing to learn more about him. Then they would know more about the 5-star army in Yangshi. This kind of publicity could often achieve something that even 1,000,000 soldiers couldn't do. When Yang Qindong brought people to watch the performance on the streets and did not return, the 1st Cavalry Division had already taken down Yanghe City and was cleaning up the battlefield. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.